Aí começa a diminuir, vir no 50, já dificulta, pode vir para o back, 61, mas pode sim, ó, começar, já começou na verdade, né? O processo de tração até o limite aqui de 80%, tá? Aqui eu tomaria cuidado. Aí o euro começaria a reverter novamente para baixo. Mas aqui tá facinho dele subir, continuar subindo, tá? E o dólar caindo, tá? E aí fluiu, tá? E aí a gente vai para encerrar essa análise aqui, o Bitica, o Bitcoin, né? Ó, já quebrou essa sequência de baixa aqui no 4 horas, já subiu forte uma barrona aí de 4 horas aqui, ó, tá vendo? Tá querendo segurar agora. Então a probabilidade de continuidade dele é, e agora ele tá, sabe, agora o bicho vai pegar, hein? Porque ele tá já querendo acelerar, ele chegando aqui em cima, ele pode agora sim romper, hein? Pode esquecer que ele rompe justamente quando o Trump vencer na eleição. Então, vamos ver. Aqui, ó. Porque ele está caminhando, pegou força, pegou fôlego, né? Caiu, né? Costumo falar, caiu, pegou fôlego, agora ele está acelerando. Essa aceleração pode vir com tudo aqui quebrar. Ou não, pode bater e continuar, não aguentar. Mas o que parece aqui das sequências aqui anteriores é que vai continuar e quebrar, tá? E aí a gente olha aqui no semanal, o topão está aqui em cima. Então aí ele quebra o topo histórico aqui, 73.500. Quem sabe caminha lá para 76. Eu acho que quebrando aqui, meu, vai parar lá no 80, viu? Vamos ver aqui que dá. Vamos dar uma pernada aqui. Essa pernada aqui de baixo. Agora uma análise aqui. Para ver a perspectiva. Vixe, vai bater no 80, hein? Vai bater no 80. Certeiro. 300. Essa retração expande ela. Próximo nível é 80, hein? Deixou essa linha até parada. Então, altíssima probabilidade do Bitcoin ir lá para 80 agora nos próximas semanas. Quem sabe até dezembro. É isso aí, então fique esperto, tá? E as votações, como é que tá? Vamos ver o que que tá rolando. Se tem alguma coisa que a gente possa ver. Tem umas coisas besteiradas, vamos ver se algum canal fala alguma coisa. Não, aqui tá falando só do.
Meeting with the chairman of TSM. So
Só
some
do
more chip news on watch, as is always. Lots going on in that space. We also, of course, with the election, have DJT on watch here, gapping up.
We beat Medicare.
Thank you, President Biden. President Trump?
Well, he's right. He did beat Medicare. He beat it to death. If I had not moved my head at that very last instant, the assassin's bullet would have perfectly hit its mark, and I would not be here tonight.
You know, there is a time and a place for long years of experience in public life. There's also
their parents are actually failing at home, meaning when they do go into
CNBC Live. Vamos ver se tem alguém falando aqui. Watching Senate from Alta.
没有关系。收音很清楚，而且。
Certified final results on November 26th. The State Board anticipates that the unofficial results reported by the end of election night will include about 98% of all ballots cast in the election. Over the 10-day canvass period, provisional ballots and some absentee ballots will be counted and uploaded to the results dashboard. These ballots are required to be counted after Election Day by law, and North Carolina's election officials will follow that law. Election officials do not call elections. Projections are made by media and/or the candidates. Actual results, typically on exit polls or the vote difference.
Em Palm Beach, Flórida, já votou. Vice-presidente da
Election
Cachaça
officials will go through the
Castro vota via e-mail,
processes
vai votar
as
meio em
required by law,
ballot, que é via
no matter how
correio,
close.
né? President Biden participou em in-person vote on Monday, October
We will send
28.
out a notice for any additional press conferences in the coming days. With that, we will take your
143 mil
questions.
assistindo
We'll
na
start in
Fox,
the
hein?
room first,
Fox,
and then we'll
Fox tá
go to the
batendo,
phone
hein?
or online, and remind those folks who are using the phone or online system to press 1 when they do ask their questions. So is there anyone in the room? You'll go to one of the mics, if you would, please.
Estão falando da Carolina. Vamos ver se ele sai lá na Flórida. Vai ser impreciso.
And welcome everyone to visit Taiwan. 有人在他留言下面留台湾的部分。哎，你没有看过买菜买火锅就在这里，有人在看留言下面留言。Weather is hot, but food is delicious. So welcome to Taiwan and the Magnum. 汉子莫名被中国禁了。呀，台湾讲多少台湾的？And Taiwan has a we share the value of freedom. We are the first country same-sex marriages legal in our country.我真的好累哦，我要先关掉一下。多年前啊，大哥也开始啦，他给我宣传台湾的牌子，然后我一定要词穷，你知道吗？但是怎么被中国禁的很多人？不但没有练好，真是呀，
say thank you to Pennsylvania, but thank you to folks across this country who wrap their arms around our family, and I hope saw yourselves in us, middle-class folks who are just trying to do the right thing by their community. We're a room full here of teachers and laborers and nurses and doctors and business owners and folks who are doing the work in this country. Yes. The Vice President has laid out a path and been very clear. She wakes up every morning thinking about you and what we can do better. And that's a pretty stark contrast to the other side. Absolutely. Yes. Pretty stark contrast. And we've laid that out, but I think the biggest thing for all of you, the privilege that we've seen of being free people and trying to be part of a system, a democracy where voices matter and every voice matters. And this week I could not be prouder to be on this ticket, to watch that contrast. One that is hopeful, rule of law matters, Constitution matters, the American experiment matters, our neighbors matter. In contrast to a list of grievances and things, look, this country's tired of it. And to be in Pennsylvania, and I know you get it a lot. When I'm here, I'm trying to watch a football game that is basically interrupted by massive amounts of ads. But those ads and the work and the on the ground is all geared at this day. These for our family, it's to say a thank you, a deep sense of gratitude to the folks who did this work, but a deep sense of optimism too. To watch, and a lot of people are trying to wonder, to watch this incredibly talented woman, I think the prosecutor, Attorney General of the largest state. Can we all just agree there's been no one more qualified? Feel it across the country, almost this sigh of relief. On Tuesday night, when Kamala Harris stood in the ellipse and said, that's how a president should sound. That's how you should talk when you stand in front of the White House. That's how you talk when you I think there's those moments when things align and you're at a point in history where things really do matter and you can take one road or the other. This country is going to take that high road. So, to all of you, we're grateful you're here. We're going to do some chatting. I think we maybe try and eat some of this here. But no, you did what was asked of you. You did what was in this moment. So many people, Americans, whatever they can do. Some would give $1, some were volunteering when they could, some were talking to neighbors. We're still standing, we're still kicking, we're still proud in this country. And when that time comes down tonight and those last polls close, now look, it's going to take some time. We're going to, you've been on the roller coaster. I'm up last night at midnight, to Dixville Gulch or whatever. I was saying, he could have been up there. That's high. It's 6 votes, people. But that's going to happen all day today. Things are going to be coming in. But keep in mind, we have the fairest, the freest, the safest election. Yes, we do. We have a free press that monitors the election. Things are done right. So just stay calm, stay with it, wait till the end. Until that time, I said, when you're feeling that sense of anxiety, the surest, the surest antidote to any of that is action. Coming out with something like this, calling up somebody, remembering, I'm on this, people like high school buddies I forgot about, I'm texting, have you voted yet? I will be honest, if they live in like South Dakota, I don't text them. I text my friends, We'll make the case. Every vote matters. Everybody's voice matters. So it's this moment, and I think, again, I hope all of you, and we're being very conscious about this as a family.
Love it.
Be mindful. Live in the moment. Understand where we're at. The privilege that we all have to do this, because history's going to judge us. And I'll tell you what, I will always stand on the side of light and joy versus that darkness. This state knows a little bit about winning. How about Pennsylvania win this for America? On Tuesday night, When Kamala Harris stood in your lips and said, that's how a president should sound standing. That's how you should talk when you stand in front of the White House. That's how you talk when
Agora, não, voto
things align and you're at a point in history where things really matter and you can take one road or the other. This country is going to take that high road. So all of you, we're grateful you're here. We're going to do some chatting. I think we maybe try to eat some of this here. But no, you did what was asked of you. You did what was in this moment. So many people, Americans, whatever they can do, some have given.
It's too early to congratulate, but we are hearing it's record kind of numbers. Caroline, do you want to just tell them what you told me a little while ago?
Sure, yeah. Enthusiasm is very high. We're seeing our voters are turning out, especially in rural areas across the country, and we see Democrat areas are not turning out as great as our people. So your people are ready and they're turning out for you, sir.
And we had a big lead to start off with. Now here it's really amazing. I got a call from the people in Texas, Dan Patrick and others. They say that they've never actually seen anything like it. So it should be good.
It will.
It should be good. I want to just thank everybody, regardless. We just wanted to come over and pay our respects. Our #1 best-selling author. Can you believe it? We have a big day. We'll be watching, and it'll be very interesting. I hope they come up with a result tonight. They say areas that were winning big, they might not be able to come up with it for 2 days. It's just a crazy thing. and I'm really saying this more for the press than for you, they should do paper ballots, same-day voting, voter ID, and be done. One day, same day. And by 10 o'clock, everybody would be, and you know, you're talking about for 8% of the cost. It would cost 8%. Think of that. For 8%, you get a better product. But we'll have to look at it.
This is the heartbeat of your organization, sir.
This is a great, well, you're the heartbeat too, aren't you?
This is the heartbeat.
What about Alex? How's Alex? Are you surprised?
You're doing great, sir. You built the greatest political movement in history, and everybody here has been working super hard for you. And you're our inspiration, and we're going to bring this up today.
It's very nice. Thank you. It's very nice. And I hear the social media has been just unbelievable.
You make it easy for us. You give us a lot of
Joe
content.
Rogan has been just he's a great guy, and that was a big thing that he did that. He just doesn't do that, and that he did that. I think it meant a lot. So all over the country, I hear it's all red, and we don't need that. You know, we went in with a very big lead, so we just had to sort of keep it. But I hear it's beyond that, and it's a movement. There's never been a movement like this, and we're going to turn our country around. We're going to not let people that murder people come into our country. We're not going to let drug dealers come into our country and terrorists come into our country. Little things like that, people are not going to stand them, and that's why we're doing well. But you know what? We still have a time to go, so let's make sure that we have this under control. And some of you I'm going to see tonight, I would imagine. I hope all of you. So I'll be seeing you tonight, and it'll be great. The First Lady's coming with us, and she's really impressed by the job you've done. Would you like to say something?
A great job. Thank you so much for all your support. And it was hard work. I know it's hours to hours, and I know how hard my husband is working non-stop. So, but thank you for all your support. Great job.
Yesterday, and the day before, you actually reminds me, the day before too, we did a lot of rallies, and they're big ones. We did full rallies as opposed to, so we got in about 5 o'clock in the morning. We left Michigan. I think Michigan's going to be great, especially since we killed the biggest factory that ever auto factory that I think anywhere at any time, which would have, destroyed them. And we did that without being president. So that was a big thing, but I think Michigan's going to be good. They're all looking really good. Susie, I can't think of anything. I'm hearing any weaknesses, right?
Not
What do you think of Susie? Would you say good? Well, we just wanted to come over and pay our respects. This is really great, and we're going to see you tonight, and hopefully they'll be able to get these expensive computers going. The reason you use computers is to make time so that it's like fast. You don't use them so that you have to come up with an answer 3 days later, and that's a little scary when they say, what are they doing? You use a computer because it calculates quickly, and you use paper because you save cost. But the paper turns out to be much quicker than the computer. There's something wrong with that, so we don't like that. But there are a lot of things that are happening in our country that have to be changed, and we'll do it, and we'll do what's right for the country. And I think that's why we're doing well. But let's see if we can close it out. But it would be, I just asked about it, wouldn't it be nice if after spending billions of dollars that they could have a computer give an answer by like 10 o'clock in the evening? Doesn't make sense, does it? Doesn't really make sense. It's crazy. Thank you very much. We'll see you later. Have a good day. And you're going to be watching, and they're going to be watching. Make sure there's no cheating, right? There's going to be no cheating. Okay. Thank you, everybody. I like that.
Thank you so much.
And then you're going to
Yeah, Lisa. Yep, I'll be bringing you around together. Perfect. Yeah, thanks for coming out. Yeah, you're welcome. Grab your sticker. Oh, thank you. Lisa, I'll bring you around. Congratulations. Grab your sticker. Thank you so much. Are you feeling good? Yes. Perfect. So just double checked. Yeah, well, yes. Face up. Face up. Yeah, grab your sticker. Brother got really cool sticker. It's sad. Like peach stickers. Well, my brother was from Richmond and they have possums. Oh my gosh. They did like the state of Tennessee stickers. So how that works? Yeah, so it just kind of depends. Yeah. Thanks for coming out today. Oh, there's someone. Oh, okay.
Okay, thank you.
You know what?
I'll take you.
Or you know what to fight for.
They use these very expensive computers, and I'm hearing in Pennsylvania they won't have an answer till 2 or 3 days from now. I think it's an absolute outrage if that's the case. Now, maybe it'll be later, but it's paper ballots in France. They went paper ballots because the mail-in was not working. It was corrupt. And in France, they went paper ballots. And at 10 o'clock in the evening, they had 37 million votes counted and done. They had a winner, they had a loser. And in this country, I mean, I'm just hearing that in certain states, it's going to be a long time, and it won't even be close. It won't even be that close. They say, I'm going to win the state, but it's going to take a long time to certify it.
Could you see a world where you don't declare victory tonight?
Yeah, I mean, I'm hearing the same things that you're hearing. I'm hearing states where I'm up by a lot, but they won't have a final number for a long time.
What are your plans for tonight in terms of watching the results and so forth?
So we're going to have a very special group of people, many of whom you know, and they'll be at Mar-a-Lago. In addition, we'll have 4,000 or 5,000 people at the convention center. On the assumption I win, I mean, I don't know if something else happens. I don't know what's going to happen in terms of declaring victory, but if in normal times I would go over to the convention center, let's say at 10 o'clock or 11 o'clock or something, but I just don't know. It looks like we have a very substantial lead. It looks like we have many more Republicans voting today than Democrats, so if you have a lead and we have a bigger vote, that means you're doing very well, but they have to call a winner. They should, and they should call a winner, yes. Just stop talking about that. Go ahead. Oh. Hello, everybody. Thank you very much. Well, we just came over to, it's too early to congratulate, but we are hearing it's record kind of numbers. Caroline, do you want to just tell them what you told me a little while ago?
Sure, yeah. Enthusiasm is very high. We're seeing our voters are turning out, especially in rural areas across the country, and we see Democrat areas are not turning out as great as our people. So your people are ready, and they're turning out for you, sir.
And we had a big lead to serve. Well, it'll be just that. We want to bring everybody in. We want to be very inclusive, and we will be very inclusive. We have a great country, but we have a country that's in trouble. It's in big trouble in many ways, and we have to straighten it out. We have crime is through the roof. We have people pouring through our borders that are not exactly perfect. They come out of prisons. 13,000 people convicted of murder. We don't need this in our country. We have enough difficulty. We don't need that. So I think people saw that. And it just seems that the conservatives are voting very powerfully.
Looking back.
Just finish it up, go ahead.
How are you feeling? Nervous, anxious?
No, I feel very confident. I have felt. You know, we went in with a very big lead today, and it looks like Republicans have shown up in force. So we'll see how it turns out. But it seems that they have really shown up in force. I just got a call from Dan Patrick in Texas. He said they've never seen anything like it. It's been very good.
Looking back, is there anything you would do differently about your campaign? Anything you regret about doing this campaign?
Look, regrets. You always have regrets. I can't think of any, to be honest, to use her expression. I can't think of any. Look, I ran a great campaign. I think it was maybe the best of the three. We did great in the first one. We did much better in the second one, but something happened. And this was the best. I would say this was the best campaign we ran.
President Trump, do you accept the possibility that you and Vice President Harris both might not get to 270 electoral votes by the end of tonight?
It should never happen. A thing like that should never happen. This election should be over. They spend all this money on machines. And frankly, if they'd use paper ballots, it would be over by 10 o'clock. And by the way, the paper ballots would cost 8%. It would be 8% of the cost. If they would use paper ballots, voter ID, proof of citizenship, and one-day voting, it would all be over by 10 o'clock in the evening. It's crazy. They use these very expensive computers, and I'm hearing in Pennsylvania they won't have an answer till 2 or 3 days from now. I think it's an absolute outrage if that's the case. Now, maybe it'll be later, but it's paper ballots in France. They went paper ballots because the mail-in was not working. It was corrupt. And in France, they went paper ballots. And at 10 o'clock in the evening, they had 37 million votes counted and done. They had a winner, they had a loser. And in this country, I mean, I'm just hearing that in certain states, it's going to be a long time, and it won't even be close. It won't even be that close. They say, I'm going to win the state, but it's going to take a long time to certify it.
Could you see a world where you don't declare victory tonight?
Yeah, I mean, I'm hearing the same things that you're hearing. I'm hearing states where I'm up by a lot, but they won't have a final number for a long time.
What are your plans for tonight in terms of watching the results and so forth?
So we're going to have a very special group of people, many of whom you know, and they'll be at Mar-a-Lago. In addition, we'll have 4,000 or 5,000 people at the convention center. On the assumption I win, I mean, I don't know if something else happens. I don't know what's going to happen in terms of declaring victory, but if in normal times I would go over to the convention center, let's say at 10 o'clock or 11 o'clock or something, but I just don't know. It looks like we have a very substantial lead. It looks like we have many more Republicans voting today than Democrats, so if you have a lead and we have a bigger vote, that means you're doing very well, but they have to call a winner. They should, and they should call a winner, yes. Just stop talking about that. Go ahead. Oh. Hello, everybody. Thank you very much. Well, we just came over to, it's too early to congratulate, but we are hearing it's record kind of numbers. Caroline, do you want to just tell them what you told me a little while ago?
Sure, yeah. Enthusiasm is very high. We're seeing our voters are turning out, especially in rural areas across the country, and we see Democrat areas are not turning out as great as our people. So your people are ready, and they're turning out for you, sir.
And we had a big lead to serve. Well, it'll be just that. We want to bring everybody in. We want to be very inclusive, and we will be very inclusive. We have a great country, but we have a country that's in trouble. It's in big trouble in many ways, and we have to straighten it out. We have crime is through the roof. We have people pouring through our borders that are not exactly perfect. They come out of prisons. 13,000 people convicted of murder. We don't need this in our country. We have enough difficulty. We don't need that. So I think people saw that. And it just seems that the conservatives are voting very powerfully.
Looking back.
Just finish it up, go ahead.
How are you feeling? Nervous, anxious?
No, I feel very confident. I have felt. You know, we went in with a very big lead today, and it looks like Republicans have shown up in force. So we'll see how it turns out. But it seems that they have really shown up in force. I just got a call from Dan Patrick in Texas. He said they've never seen anything like it. It's been very good.
Looking back, is there anything you would do differently about your campaign? Do you regret about how you're in this campaign?
Look, regrets. You always have regrets. I can't think of any, to be honest, to use her expression. I can't think of any. Look, I ran a great campaign. I think it was maybe the best of the three. We did great in the first one. We did much better in the second one, but something happened. And this was the best. I would say this was the best campaign we ran.
President Trump, do you accept the possibility that you and Vice President Harris both might not get to 270 electoral votes by the end of tonight?
It should never happen. A thing like that should never happen. This election should be over. They spend all this money on machines. And frankly, if they'd use paper ballots, it would be over by 10 o'clock. And by the way, the paper ballots would cost 8%. It would be 8% of the cost. If they would use paper ballots, voter ID, proof of citizenship, and one-day voting, it would all be over by 10 o'clock in the evening. It's crazy. They use these very expensive computers, and I'm hearing in Pennsylvania they won't have an answer till 2 or 3 days from now. I think it's an absolute outrage if that's the case. Now, maybe it'll be later, but it's paper ballots in France. They went paper ballots because the mail-in was not working. It was corrupt. And in France, they went paper ballots. And at 10 o'clock in the evening, they had 37 million votes counted and done. They had a winner, they had a loser. And in this country, I mean, I'm just hearing that in certain states, it's going to be a long time, and it won't even be close. It won't even be that close. They say, I'm going to win the state, but it's going to take a long time to certify it.
Could you see a world where you don't declare victory tonight?
Yeah, I mean, I'm hearing the same things that you're hearing. I'm hearing states where I'm up by a lot, but they won't have a final number for a long time.
What are your plans for tonight in terms of watching the results and so forth?
So we're going to have a very special group of people, many of whom you know, and they'll be at Mar-a-Lago. In addition, we'll have 4,000 or 5,000 people at the convention center. On the assumption I win, I mean, I don't know if something else happens. I don't know what's going to happen in terms of declaring victory, but if in normal times I would go over to the convention center, let's say at 10 o'clock or 11 o'clock or something, but I just don't know. It looks like we have a very substantial lead. It looks like we have many more Republicans voting today than Democrats. So if you have a lead and we have a bigger vote, that means you're doing very well. But they have to call a winner. They should. And they should call a winner, yes. Just stop talking about that. Go ahead. Oh. Hello, everybody. Thank you very much. Well, we just came over to just tell them what you told me a little while ago.
Sure, yeah. Enthusiasm is very high. We're seeing our voters are turning out, especially in rural areas across the country, and we see Democrat areas are not turning out as great as our people. So your people are ready and they're turning out for you, sir.
And we had a big lead to serve. Well, it'll be just that. We want to bring everybody in. We want to be very inclusive, and we will.
Good morning. Testing 1 2 3. Testing 1 2 3. We got sound. Good morning. I'm Tanisha Hudspeth, your Harris County Clerk. TENESHIAHUDSPETH. It is Election Day. We are finally here. Can you believe it? More than 1.2 million voted early here in Harris County, and as of a little 10 o'clock, well, now we're a little bit after 10 o'clock, more than 85,000 voters have voted here in Harris County today. Our team has been working hard to create a strong election infrastructure to receive voters today, and so far so good, even with inclement weather this morning. So let's not let the rain hold us back from voting in record numbers today, Harris County. As a matter of fact, there are still 700 vote centers available for you to vote today. Anywhere in Harris County, voters should know you can go absolutely anywhere. Much like early voting, you can choose any vote center that's most convenient or closest to you. Polls are open until 7 o'clock p.m. tonight, as long as you are in line by 7 p.m. What does that look like? There's probably a couple of election workers or greeters waiting to see who was that last person in line by 7 o'clock p.m. to allow all voters in the line to be accepted. Here's some tools that you all need to know for Election Day. Make a plan to vote. Know what's closest to you. Look at your sample ballot. View your specific sample ballot. Most voters in Harris County have 50 to 70 different contests to choose from. And make sure that you have one of the acceptable forms of ID. You can go to harrisvotes.com to find all the latest and greatest information about Election Day here in Harris County, as well calling our hotline, 713-755-6965. And to the very right of me, maybe left of you, there is a huge call center that are taking calls from our election judges all day, making sure that we're supporting our election workers and accepting calls from our voters. voters to help them find the closest poll, make sure that they have the tools and information they need to cast their ballot. For all those who vote by mail, that have your ballot by mail and have voted it, today only you can take that mail ballot to 1001 Preston downtown. That is the Harris County office, administrative office. Again, that's 1001 Preston. If you have not mailed your ballot because you were afraid we wouldn't receive it today, you can go downtown to 1001 Preston. Now, the voter must go themselves and show proof of ID, their particular ID that they're checking that ballot in. So today, and it won't be hard to see, right off of Preston and San Jacinto between Maine as well, there's a tent that shows that we are there ready to accept your ballot and your credentials. Again, for all voters who have received mail ballots and have not returned those, they can be returned downtown, or you can still go to a vote center, surrender that ballot, and vote a regular ballot. So every vote center has an oversupply of all items today. We make sure that we've over allocated for all supplies and documents for our election workers. There's also extra voting machines and materials in the field. Communication between our office and the election workers have been continuing on throughout the morning. We actually started even earlier, knowing that we had inclement weather happening this morning. So again, all voters should go to harrisvotes.com to get the most important information. In terms of service calls today, we've had about 60% were calls from election judges needing assistance before opening the vote center. So about 60% or so election judges. 40% were calls that were from the voters, right? What information do I need to go before vote? I want to check my voter registration status. You all should know, although we run elections, we don't run voter registration. That is the office of Ann Harris Bennett, the tax assessor collector, but we do work in tandem with each other. Their office is taking calls and has a very large call center today in regards to voter registration, and we are working around the clock to make sure that every voter has the opportunity to do so today. Are there any questions?
Talk about the energy today. Obviously, we have hundreds of paid election workers behind us. Just give us people a sense at home what goes on in this building.
Yes, well, we're talking about the energy in here. Let's talk about the energy around this entire county. Here is our elections headquarters. So you have hundreds of individuals here that are servicing the individuals in the field. So from the phone center to our tech lines to our early voting ballot board members that review the mail ballots, and all of our administrative operations are happening here. Also tonight is where we actually tally votes. Some of you will be with us later on this evening. This is where all information in regards to results will come out of. So a good amount of operational systems are happening here. We're supporting everything in the field. And in the field is more than 12,000 election workers. Harris County is the third largest county in the nation and the largest here in the state of Texas. And so today we are supporting those 12,000 plus. Many of our vendors, from our voting system vendors to our tech lines, they're all here supporting us. We're a big operation and we have all hands on deck today.
And you talked about inclement weather. Have you seen any issues with that? I know TSU lost power. There's voting happening there. Talk a little bit about that.
So TSU lost power yesterday.
Yes.
That was yesterday, not today. It was not today. It did not impact the vote center on campus. There were parts of the campus that had outages, but not the vote center. We got on that right away. We spoke with the university and no issues with power today. So I just wanted to clarify that. We had a little bit of some power outages at a couple of vote centers. However, all of our machines are battery backup. No one stopped voting today, and power were up within minutes at all of those vote centers. So no long-term power outages, small increment outages. Again, all of our battery backup systems has made sure that voters kept voting, and within minutes, all of those locations had power backup. So that's to be expected with the weather and wind. We knew to be prepared for that today, but luckily we've not had to go dispatch a generator anywhere. So that's a very good sign.
Outside of the weather-related concerns, have there been any other issues that have been reported?
Not major issues. You know, on the first day of Election Day, there's always small things that we have to work through. This is one day amongst less than the 12 days of early voting. So some of these judges are just getting started. There's a little nerves kicking in. They see the lines developing. So these are all just things that, you know, our election workers had to get settled, had to work those things out and get moving. We've done some adjusting of some of our machines and things of that nature. Nothing major, right? This is a typical election day. No major infrastructure issues with our voting today. Yes, ma'am. You're going to have to use your outside voice in here. I have a lot of voices I hear.
How long would it take for, like, let's say the last polling station that had their last voter to get voting count?
Okay, let me clarify. Meaning, if someone's in line by 7 p.m. tonight, how long could it take the last voter to vote? Well, we're going to find out tonight, right? This is election day. I can guarantee you that there is going to be plenty of voters in line by 7. We will take as much time at those vote centers as possible to vote all those voters. So buckle up, because it's going to be a long night, right? I'm going to go ahead and say that probably at least 10 or 20 times. We will process those voters. I imagine there's going to be more than a dozen locations that will still be voting voters. Could be 9 o'clock tonight, could be 10 o'clock tonight. We will make sure that we're getting real-time information to know about how many are online, if there's additional support needed, additional, workers or anything of that nature to kind of help those lines. But it's hard to say. Those are the things, unfortunately, the county clerk can't predict.
All right, she says, buckle up. It's going to be a long night. That seems to be the sentiment for many clerks and election officials across the U.S. On this election day. This happening out in Harris County, Texas, moments ago, giving that election day update in the Texas area. On the right side of your screen, that top right box, a live look out in Philadelphia as ballots are being processed on this election day. And then that bottom box, a live look out in the Big Apple of New York City, a voting location there, as people are coming out on this Tuesday, November 5th, to exercise their right to vote. 12:57 is the time here on the East Coast. Let's go to our final 2-minute commercial break of the hour. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Live Now from Fox. I'm Jeanne Francine. About 1 minute shy from the top of the 1 o'clock hour here on the East Coast, and we appreciate you tuning in for your Election Day coverage. We've been getting a lot of feeds all day of different polling locations, and right now I want to take you out to Phoenix, Arizona. You can see the young and the old out exercising their right to vote on this Election Day. And as I told you all this morning when I first came on the air, expect the lines to get a lot longer throughout the day. But the good news is if you are in line before your polls close, so let's say you're in line at 6 o'clock and your polls close at 6 o'clock, you will still be allowed to vote. But if you get into that line at 6:05, I can't make any promises. Maybe they will give you some leeway in that polling precinct. But as we continue to follow your top stories and headlines on this Election Day, right now I actually want to take you out to Maricopa County out in Arizona as they are about to hold an election newser to give an update on the state of the race and elections in that neck of the woods. Let's head on out there and listen in.
I'm glad the sun is not nice and bright today. Can you guys hear me okay? Test 3, 2, 1. Everyone in the back in the cheap seats, you guys hear as well? Okay, good. Test, 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 test. Okay, tell me if there's a problem, otherwise I'm stepping away.
All right, looks like they were just doing a sound check there, so giving a few more moments. But as we wait out in Arizona, as you could see, some sunny conditions out in that area on this election day. Again, guys, showing you this polling precinct out in Phoenix. All right, I see some people about to walk up for this presser, so let's head back out there live and listen in. Again, this is the Maricopa County Election Newser, your midday update.
Happy Election Day from the Maricopa County Tabulation and Election Center. We're happy to be here. We're hoping to provide information from the activities so far this morning. My name is Jennifer Lewer. I'm a Deputy Elections Director. With me today is Supervisor Bill Gates, and I'm going to go ahead and let him take the beginning of this press conference. He will have comments, and then we will do our question and answer. There are quite a few members of the media here. Our technology isn't as slick it has been in the past press conferences, but we'll do our best to repeat the questions as we get them for those of you who are watching live online. And now, Supervisor Bill Gates.
Thank you, Jennifer. Appreciate it. Want to thank everyone for coming out here. Really Chamber of Commerce weather day today. We've got 74 degrees for our high temperatures, so really happy to see everyone out here. Things are going very well right now out there at our 246 vote centers across Maricopa County. Right now, the average wait time is about 2 minutes. So very, very short lines out there, so that's great. We've already had over 93,000 people check in to vote this morning. So lots of people out there, but certainly what we were anticipating. At the most, we have just a small handful of our vote centers that have 30-minute waits, but like I said, the average wait is just 2 minutes long. As we've been suggesting to people throughout this period of voting, make a plan if you haven't voted yet. We anticipate the heaviest time in the remainder of the day is going to be from 4 to 7 p.m. So before you go out to vote at the vote centers, go on to our website, go on to locations.maricopa.vote. There you can check out all of the vote centers and the current wait times, so you can go to the most convenient vote center and go ahead and vote and then go on with your day. We are grateful for everyone who is working hard here in the tabulation center. We have people working 16, 18-hour days. This is a 24/7 operation, and I really appreciate, and I know the Board of Supervisors and the recorder appreciate all of their hard work. Just one thing to keep in mind, if you get into line at 7 p.m., you will have the opportunity to vote. No matter how long that line is, stay in line and go ahead and vote. As far as any questions about what's going on with the election, if you have concerns about things that you might be reading on social media and elsewhere, please go to our website, justthefacts.vote, where you can get the most up-to-date and you can get accurate information. The first results will be reported this evening around 8 p.m., and we anticipate we'll have approximately 1.2 million ballots that will be reported at 8 p.m. And then as the evening goes on and as we go into the early morning hours of Wednesday, we'll be reporting the results of people who are going to the vote centers and voting in person today. We anticipate that those numbers that we report around 8 p.m., that'll be about 70 to 75% of all of the early ballots have been cast. We've had a lot of excitement for this election, a lot of participation both in early voting, and of course that is continuing on today. So with that, be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
And we're going to actually utilize spokesperson Fields to help point people out for their questions, because we are. Yes, Nicole.
I was wondering, are you all seeing the misinformation circulating that some vote centers are shut down, and can you address that? How many shut down?
Yes, absolutely. No, appreciate that question. There have been no vote centers that have been shut down. We are out there going ahead and servicing the printers as we normally would if there are issues, where people, where we need to update the toner. But there have been no vote centers that have been shut down. Things are moving very smoothly out there today.
So the question was to sort by wait times. The way the back end of this information works on the website is if you put an address in, it will give you the shortest wait times within that area. We do not have a sort that will actually sort everything in the valley, because the website's really designed for that voter who gets on and they're at a certain location and they want to see the shortest wait times in the location that they are at.
Yeah, so like I said, the printers have been operating very well. The board, we invested $9 million in getting new printers, and those are running very well. We're not running into, at this point, any of the tabulation challenges that we saw in 2022. And with regard to some of the ones that have a little bit longer lines, again, we're talking like 30 minutes, 32 minutes. I know Surprise, City Center, that one is very popular. Location, I believe Mesa Community College, Indian Bend. These are some of the ones that, frankly, in early voting, we've seen with some of the longer wait times, too. But again, we told people, we talked about this yesterday, we've been talking about this, lines will occur, but we're very pleased with what we're seeing right now. But something that's important for people that really want to avoid the lines, your slowest time left in the day now is going to be mid-afternoon. So go out in the mid-afternoon, you're going to be likely to have the shortest lines. And again, if you can't go and vote until after work, which I absolutely understand, for those folks, probably a good idea to go on to locations.maricopa.vote to see where the shortest lines are, and then go there and get in line by 7 p.m. and you will have the opportunity to vote today.
Behind the camera over here.
Yes, in the black. All right. You've done the investment, or we have the sheriff speak?
Yeah. Well, I would say, first of all, from our perspective, and happy to see if the sheriff has anything to add, we're very proud to have made the investments in security here at this facility and elsewhere. We have invested millions of dollars in that to make sure that the workers who are here today feel safe, and things have been very calm, but happy to, if the sheriff wants to add anything to that.
Yeah, just real quick, I want to thank all the public safety partnership out there. Every agency is dialed up for this. We've done a lot of planning prior to this, and we have several emergency operations centers, communications, cross-line, all the way from McTech to Phoenix to our ACTIC and even the sheriff's office. So those communication lines are continuing with anything that comes up. At this point in time, we've had no credible issues relative to public safety, and we will continue to monitor and assess and have those resources deployed throughout Maricopa County until those polling centers close, and then obviously things will start to wind down over at the tabulation center.
Yeah, and I just want to thank the sheriff. I want to thank all law enforcement here in Maricopa County, as well as our federal partners who have just been amazing, county attorney, U.S. attorney, across the board. It's a partnership that we have here in Maricopa County that I think is really second to none. So again, Sheriff, thank you so much.
We got folks in the back that we don't want to miss out on. I don't know if they can be seen. Jillian? So So the question is about the shutdown of our vote centers. Our vote centers, obviously, they close at 7. If voters are in line, they are allowed to stay in line, they are allowed to vote. Maricopa County is an expansive county. We are larger, I think, than 7 states in the United States. So as those vote centers close down, they pack up their materials. It's going to take time for them to bring those materials back to the tabulation center. We are expecting to be here most of the night as those centers break down and bring back that information. I don't know that that's very helpful to your question, but it will take time. All right. We're good to go. Thank you.
Thank you.
So out in Arizona, the Maricopa County election officials holding this 1 o'clock Eastern time election day update on the left side of your screen. Some reminders for you on this election day as millions across the country head to the polls. All eyes are on the swing states of Arizona, Nevada, Wisconsin, Michigan, Georgia, North Carolina, and Pennsylvania. And Arizona polling precincts will be open until 7 p.m. Mountain Time. So wanted to give you all that quick update. And as we discuss polling precincts out in Arizona, want to take you out to one out in Phoenix here at 112 on the East Coast. Let's go to a quick 2-minute commercial break. When we come back, heading into more election day coverage from across America. We'll be right back in just 2 quick minutes. .114 is the time here on the East Coast. Welcome back to Live Now from Fox. I'm Gina Francine. Several live pictures we are getting into our Live Now from Fox studio. I want to share them with you at this hour. This one on your screen taking us out to Philly as vote counting is underway in real time. So you're getting a live look there. This one right here, this shot, it takes us out to Milwaukee. A press conference just wrapped up in this area that we want to share with you from the Milwaukee Election Commission out there. I'm going to play that for you now.
Nesse processo aí, vamos ver os gráficos aqui. O euro disparou.
Sorry, it was 106,000 ballots as of this morning. I'm going to be checking that in a little bit and then putting it up on the website for you guys to see. So happy to take any questions. I think we were less than an hour of the start time, so I still feel pretty good. I mean, I've been telling everyone after midnight. We would continue to receive ballots until 8 p.m. Every single ballot will be counted that's legitimate and qualifying. The post office let us know that they're going to continue to send ballots to us instead of just doing like 1 or 2 deliveries. So that's great. We're going to have a continuous flow. We're closing our drop boxes at 6 p.m. today, and so that gives us enough opportunity to process those ballots and get them out here instead of having like a large number at the end of the day. So I'm still anticipating 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning right now, but it's hard to tell. Can't read the tea leaves, but at the end of the day, I think probably later on in the evening, about 5, we'll have a better sense. I don't think so, no. Where the biggest challenge in Central Count is the formal pre-exporting, exporting, transfer, and importing process that occurs that the city of Milwaukee does. And you see we have 13 machines. It's a very large area. We're going to have 2 bipartisan teams. Myself and the deputy will be doing this in the public sphere. That takes a long time to walk through these 13 machines and download that information. It gets secured in a bag, all in the public sphere, then transported under police escort to Milwaukee County Courthouse. The courthouse also have its additional security measures, and then we go in and formally transfer those results to the county, and then they upload those, which that takes several hours in and of itself. We will continue to give you as many updates as possible so that you are informed and that you can let the American public where we stand. We appreciate all of your efforts today. I have not heard of them yet. No. We just have a lot to count. This space is really big, and so in order to protect the security of the ballots, we wanted to make sure everything. We don't like moving uncounted ballots outside of pods. So we made that decision. We're feeling okay. It was less than an hour. Nothing to see here. We're good. And so we'll continue to give you those updates. Oh, definitely. So one of the things first, this here central count is absentee ballots. One of the process of absentee balloting is before the ballot is even issued, the voter has to issue an absentee application with the photo, regular voters with the photo ID. We confirm, is that person a legitimate voter? They have their application, we scan that, we track it, and we issue them a ballot. That ballot gets sent to the voter, and when it returns, we make sure, does this ballot connect with a person? So any ballot that does not, we cannot connect to a voter, any ballot that does not meet the qualifying standards will not be counted, will not be opened. We have enhanced security. We have a team of law enforcement partners here today and all throughout the city that are acting swiftly. Our chiefs are out there, lots of staff. I think the one thing I asked, it's a lot of lines. People are excited to vote in this presidential election, and we ask for patience. And then, don't fret to call us at our City Hall office if you have questions or concerns.
How many people do you have working? How many people are working on the process right now, and will that go up or down as the night goes on?
Well, I think we have about 300 that registered to work. I feel like we have about 300. We have a couple people working morning shifts and a couple people working afternoon shifts. So I don't see, we have to balance that. So I don't see much of a change to, I think we'd argue about over 300 people here in total. I'm sorry? Oh, the predictions of turnout. I don't know, but you know what? It's hard to read the tea leaves with early voting, but if you notice, early voting numbers surpassed 2020. So we're feeling confident. And so I hope turnout is great, but at this point, I mentioned 31,000 at 11 a.m., but that's only 96 of the 180 polling locations. And I would argue the other remaining locations that didn't report is because they're really busy. So I'm feeling good. I think when we get later in the afternoon, we'll have a better sense of where we're headed. They're on site, and remember the flash drives right now are just flash drives. Once we go through the clearing and the formatting process, then they become official election, must be under security, and that will be occurring probably around 7. Yeah.
Spots. The evening will begin when polls close in West Virginia, likely early in the evening. The Republican governor, Jim Justice, is trying to swing this state from blue to red, and he is a prohibitive favorite. If he were to win, puts Democrats with zero margin for error in a very tight corner. The entire U.S. House, all 435 seats are up for election tonight. An early indication could come in the Virginia 7th District, where polls close early in the evening. This is a battleground race to succeed a retiring Democrat. Eugene Vindman against Derek Anderson. If somebody overperforms in the Virginia 7th in the early returns, it could be indicative of what happens elsewhere. Real quickly, let me run you through California, where there's not one, not two, but a whole bunch of battleground competitive races in just California. If one party were to sweep through, they could make big headway towards the end result. Democrats need to net just 4 seats in the U.S. House to take control and very much handcuff or help a future President Harris or Trump. At our election headquarters in New York, I'm Scott McFarland.
Scott, thank you for that. And here at CBS News 24/7, when we see it, you see it. That's what this broadcast is. Scott, thank you for that. And here at CBS News 24/7, when we see it, you see it. That's what this broadcast is. And we have some breaking news out of the Middle East. It's big breaking news. A major development within Israeli leadership as it pertains to Israel's military. Here's your headline. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu just fired his Minister of Defense, Yoav Gallant. In a video statement, Benjamin Netanyahu says during the last months, the trust between the two of them cracked. The words of Benjamin Netanyahu, cracked. He has appointed Minister Israel Katz in his place. This will command a lot of headlines as it pertains to Israel's war in Gaza and also the fight in Lebanon as well. We'll be watching that for any headlines and developments as CBS News 24/7 continues on the other side of this break. November 5th. We'll be right back.
Ulises, Ulics, last name Zuniga Reyes, and Z with a Z, yeah, Zuniga with a Z. Yeah. I am 39 years old. Yeah.
And if you could tell us who you voted for and what were the reasons that compelled you to vote that way?
Well, I've always been a Democrat.
A tribute to those who
received by the office once they mail it back. We have seen an overall decrease in the number of people who have requested absentee by mail ballots this year as compared to 2020, but you can't necessarily attribute that to just this issue. 2020 was a very different time, and a lot of people requested mail ballots because they just didn't know what to expect on election day that year with the pandemic. So it's hard to, make a causation there. On the Richmond issue, like we said, it did affect 11 voters. They were able to only vote a federal-only ballot, but that has since been resolved.
They were given the correct ballot with mayoral, congressional, Senate?
They are not allowed to vote an additional ballot.
Okay. So what's the resolution then?
Travis Lawler, you're up.
Yeah, I guess I was just wondering about the voters in Richmond. Do you know what happened? I mean, or why that happened?
My understanding is that the officers of election gave out the incorrect ballot to the voter that had only the presidential race on the ballot.
Again, just to clarify, when you say, what do you mean by resolved? As in, like, no more wrong ballots were being given out?
That's correct.
Okay.
13 News Now. Do you have a question?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, in the wake of the voters who were removed from the polls or from the voter rolls due to the citizenship issue on the DMV forms, when they go get their provisional ballots today, if they do same-day registration, what do they need to do to successfully make sure that provisional ballot is counted? Is there any follow-up they need to do?
First, in Virginia, we want every eligible voter to vote in this election. And when an individual fills out a provisional ballot, they fill out a registration form. So they would simply need to fill out the registration form accurately. If they are a citizen, they would indicate that they are a citizen, and that's all that that would require.
Purge voters, there was a House P&E meeting that you attended back in September. If I remember correctly, you talked about an accuracy percentage on what you believed the system would catch. Were you guys aware of legal citizens getting swept up in the purge as early as September, or when did you guys first realize that legal voters were also getting removed from the rolls?
So let's be clear. We want every eligible voter in Virginia to vote. This is a process that has been in place since 2006. It has been managed and processed the exact same way by every administration since 2006 when the law was enacted. Nothing has changed in the way that that process is managed by the department. And it begins when an individual walks into a DMV and self-declares that they are a non-citizen, and there is direct interaction with the individual throughout the entire process. They start the transaction, they are notified multiple times before they are canceled and given the opportunity to affirm their citizenship if they made an error at the DMV.
Jeff Bossert with Radio IQ. Do you have a question? Michael O'Connor, do you have a question?
Yeah. Do you know how many people were kicked off the rolls leading up to today? Is there an updated figure? And can you just confirm that this is Susan Beals? The audio was just cut out, so I just want to make sure it's you.
My name is Susan Beals. I'm the Commissioner of Elections for the Commonwealth of Virginia. And in terms of go ahead.
Yeah, just have an updated figure for how many people were kicked off the rolls.
I think the figure that has been out there is the figure that stands. There has not been any additional work done on that.
Okay, I thought there were daily updates to it.
That process ceased on October 14th.
So no one's been purged from the rolls since October 14th?
The last time that records were sent to registrars was October 14th.
Michelle Hankerson, do you have a question?
I've been a leader on it. They know that, and everybody else knows it. I have been a leader on fertilization, IVF. And the other thing, you should ask, will she allow you should ask, will she allow abortion in the 8th month, 9th month, 7th month?
Come on.
Okay, would you do that? Why don't you ask her that question? 9th month, 7th month.
Come on.
Okay, would you do that? Why don't you ask her that question?
Why don't you answer the question? Would you
because
veto?
Under Roe v. Wade,
Answer the question, would you veto?
you could do abortions in the 7th month, the 8th month, the 9th month,
not true.
and probably after birth. Just look at the former governor of Virginia. The governor of Virginia said we put the baby aside and then we determine what we want to do with the baby.
President Trump, thank you.
We're going to turn now to immigration and border security. We know it's an issue that's important to Republicans, Democrats, voters across the board in this country. Vice President Harris, you were tasked by President Biden with getting to the root causes of migration from Central America. We know that illegal border crossings reached a record high in the Biden administration. This past June, President Biden imposed tough new asylum restrictions. We know the numbers since then have dropped significantly. But my question to you tonight is, why did the administration wait until 6 months before the election to act? And would you have done anything differently from President Biden on this?
So I'm the only person on this stage who has prosecuted transnational criminal organizations for the trafficking of guns, drugs, and human beings. And let me say that the United States Congress, including some of the most conservative members of the United States Senate, came up with a border security bill which I supported. And that bill would have put 1,500 more border agents on the border to help those folks who are working there right now overtime trying to do their job. It would have allowed us to stem the flow of fentanyl coming into the United States. I know there are so many families watching tonight who have been personally affected by the surge of fentanyl in our country. That bill would have put more resources to allow us to prosecute transnational criminal organizations for trafficking in guns, drugs, and human beings. But you know what happened to that bill? Donald Trump got on the phone, called up some folks in Congress, and said, kill the bill. And you know why? Because he'd prefer to run on a problem instead of fixing a problem. And understand, this comes at a time where the people of our country actually need a leader who engages in solutions, who actually addresses the problems at hand. But what we have in the former president is someone who would prefer to run on a problem instead of fixing a problem. And I'll tell you something, he's going to talk about immigration a lot tonight, even when it's not the subject that is being raised. And I'm going to actually do something really unusual, and I'm going to invite you to attend one of Donald Trump's rallies, because it's a really interesting thing to watch. You will see during the course of his rallies, he talks about fictional characters like Hannibal Lecter. He will talk about windmills cause cancer. And what you will also notice is that people start leaving his rallies early out of exhaustion and boredom. And I will tell you, the one thing you will not hear him talk about is you. You will not hear him talk about your needs, your dreams, and your desires. And I'll tell you, I believe you deserve a president who actually puts you first, and I pledge to you that I will.
Vice President Harris, thank you. President Trump, on that point, I want to get your response.
Well, I would like to respond.
Let me just ask, though, why did you try to kill that bill, and successfully so, that would have put thousands of additional agents and officers on the border?
First, let me respond as to the
Please.
rallies. She said people start leaving. People don't go to her rallies. There's no reason to go. And the people that do go, she's bussing them in and paying them to be there, and then showing them in a different light. So she can't talk about that. People don't leave my rallies. We have the biggest rallies, the most incredible rallies in the history of politics. That's because people want to take their country back. Our country is being lost. We're a failing nation. And it happened 3.5 years ago. And what's going on here, you're going to end up in World War III, just to go into another subject. What they have done to our country by allowing these millions and millions of people to come into our country, and look at what's happening to the towns all over the United States. And a lot of towns don't want to talk. It's not going to be Aurora or Springfield. A lot of towns don't want to talk about it because they're so embarrassed by it. In Springfield, they're eating the dogs, the people that came in. They're eating the cats. They're eating the pets of the people that live there. And this is what's happening in our country, and it's a shame. As far as rallies are concerned, as far as the reason they go is they like what I say. They want to bring our country back. They want to make America great again. It's a very simple phrase, make America great again. She's destroying this country, and if she becomes president, this country doesn't have a chance of success. Not only success, we'll end up being Venezuela on steroids.
I just want to clarify here. You bring up Springfield, Ohio, and ABC News did reach out to the city manager there. He told us there have been no credible reports of specific claims of pets being harmed, injured, or abused by individuals within the immigrant community.
Well, I've seen people on television.
Let me just say here, this is the
people on television say my dog was taken and used for food. So maybe he said that, and maybe that's a good thing to say for a city manager.
I'm not taking this from
but
television.
But the people
I'm
on
taking it from
television
the city
saying
manager.
their dog was eaten by the people that went there.
Again, the Springfield city manager says there's no evidence of that. Vice
We'll
President
find
Harris,
out.
I'll let you respond to the rest of what you've heard.
You talk about extreme. You know, this is, I think, one of the reasons why in this election I actually have the endorsement of 200 Republicans who have formerly worked with President Bush, Mitt Romney, and John McCain, including the endorsement of former Vice President Dick Cheney and Congress member Liz Cheney. And if you want to really know the inside track on who the former president is, if he didn't make it clear already, just ask people who have worked with him. His former chief of staff, a 4-star general, has said he has contempt for the Constitution of the United States. His former national security advisor has said he is dangerous and unfit. His former Secretary of Defense has said the nation, the Republic, would never survive another Trump term. And when we listen to this kind of rhetoric, when the issues that affect the American people are not being addressed, I think the choice is clear in this election.
President Trump, I'll give you a quick minute to respond here.
Thank you, because when I hear that, see, I'm a different kind of a person. I fired most of those people. Not so graciously. They did bad things or a bad job. I fired them. They never fired one person. They didn't fire anybody having to do with Afghanistan and the Taliban and the 13 people who's were just killed, viciously and violently killed. And I got to know the parents and the family. They didn't fire. They should have fired all those generals, all those top people, because that was one of the most incompetently handled situations anybody has ever seen. So when somebody does a bad job, I fire him. And you take a guy like Esper. He was no good. I fired him. So he writes a book. Another one writes a book. Because with me, they can write books. With nobody else can they. But they have done such a poor job, and they never fire anybody. Look at the economy. Look at the inflation. They didn't fire any of their economists. They have the same people. That's a good way not to have books written about you. But just to finish, I got more votes than any Republican in history by far. In fact, I got more votes than any president, sitting president, in history by far.
Let me continue on immigration. It was what you wanted to talk about earlier, so let's get back to your deportation proposal that the vice president has reacted to as well. President Trump, you call this the largest domestic deportation operation in the history of our country. You say you would use the National Guard. You say if things get out of control, you'd have no problem using the U.S. military.
Police, yes.
You also said you would use local police. How would you deport 11 million undocumented immigrants? I know you believe that number is much higher. Take us through this. What does this look like? Will authorities be going door to door in this country?
Yeah, it is much higher because of them. They allowed criminals, many, many millions of criminals. They allowed terrorists. They allowed common street criminals. They allowed people to come in, drug dealers, to come into our country. And they're now in the United States and told by their countries like Venezuela, don't ever come back or we're going to kill you. Do you know that crime in Venezuela and crime in countries all over the world is way down? You know why? Because they've taken their criminals off the street and they've given them to her to put into our country. And this will be one of the greatest mistakes in history for them to allow. And I think they probably did it because they think they're going to get votes, but it's not worth it because they're destroying the fabric of our country by what they've done. There's never been anything done like this at all. They've destroyed the fabric of our country. Millions of people let in. And all over the world, crime is down. All over the world except here. Crime here is up and through the roof. Despite their fraudulent statements that they made, crime in this country is through the roof. And we have a new form of crime. It's called migrant crime. And it's happening at levels that nobody thought possible.
President Trump, as you know, the FBI says overall violent crime is actually coming down in this country. But
Excuse me, the FBI they were defrauding statements. They didn't include the worst cities. They didn't include the cities with the worst crime. It was a fraud. Just like their number of 818,000 jobs that they said they created turned out to be a fraud.
President Trump, thank you. I'll let you respond, Vice President Harris.
Well, I think this is so rich, coming from someone who has been prosecuted for national security crimes, economic crimes, election interference, has been found liable for sexual assault, and his next big court appearance is in November at his own criminal sentencing. And let's be clear where each person stands on the issue of what is important about respect for the rule of law and respect for law enforcement. The former vice president called for defunding federal law enforcement, 45,000 agents, get this, on the day after he was arraigned on 34 felony counts. So let's talk about what is important in this race. It is important that we move forward, that we turn the page on this same old tired rhetoric and address the needs of the American people, address what we need to do about the housing shortage, which I have a plan for, address what we must do to support our small businesses, address bringing down the price of groceries. But frankly, the American people are exhausted with this same old tired playbook.
Vice President Harris, thank you.
Excuse me. Every one of those cases was started by them against their political opponent. And I'm winning most of them, and I will win the rest on appeal. And you saw that with the decision that came down just recently from the Supreme Court. I'm winning most of them. But those are cases, it's called weaponization. Never happened in this country. They weaponized the Justice Department. Every one of those cases was involved with the DOJ, from Atlanta and Fani Willis to the Attorney General of New York and the DA in New York. Every one of those cases. And then they say, oh, he's a criminal. They're the ones that made them go after me. By the way, Joe Biden was found essentially guilty on the documents case. And what happened in my documents case? They said, oh, that's the toughest of them all. A complete and total victory. 2 months ago, it was thrown out. It's weaponization, and they used it, and it's never happened in this country. They used it to try and win an election. They're fake cases.
President Trump, thank you. A really quick response here, Vice President Harris, on this notion of weaponization of the Justice Department.
Well, let's talk about extreme and understand the context in which this election in 2024 is taking place. The United States Supreme Court recently ruled that the former president would essentially be immune from any misconduct if he were to enter the White House again. Understand, this is someone who has openly said he would terminate, I'm quoting, terminate the Constitution of the United States, that he would weaponize the Department of Justice against his political enemies. Someone who has openly expressed disdain for members of our military. Understand what it would mean if Donald Trump were back in the White House with no guardrails, because certainly we know now the court won't stop him. We know J.D. Vance is not going to stop him. It's up to the American people
Vice President
to stop
Harris,
him.
Thank you. Lindsay?
Vice President Harris, in your last run for president.
This is the one that weaponized, not me. She weaponized. I probably took a bullet to the head because of the things that they say about me. They talk about democracy. I'm a threat to democracy. They're the threat to democracy with a fake Russia investigation that went nowhere.
We have a lot to get to. Lindsay?
Vice President Harris, in your last run for president, you said you wanted to ban fracking. Now you don't. You wanted mandatory government buyback programs for assault weapons. Now your campaign says you don't. You supported decriminalizing border crossings. Now you're taking a harder line. I know you say that your values have not changed. So then why have so many of your policy positions changed?
So my values have not changed, and I'm going to discuss every one of at least every point that you've made. But in particular, let's talk about fracking, because we're here in Pennsylvania. I made that very clear in 2020. I will not ban fracking. I have not banned fracking as Vice President of the United States. And in fact, I was the tie-breaking vote on the Inflation Reduction Act, which opened new leases for fracking. My position is that we have got to invest in diverse sources of energy so we reduce our reliance on foreign oil. We have had the largest increase in domestic oil production in history because of an approach that recognizes that we cannot over-rely on foreign oil. As it relates to my values, let me tell you, I grew up a middle-class kid raised by a hardworking mother who worked and saved and was able to buy our first home when I was a teenager. The values I bring to the importance of home ownership, knowing not everybody got handed $400 million on a silver platter and then filed bankruptcy 6 times, is a value that I bring to my work to say we are going to work with the private sector and home builders to increase 3 million homes, increase by 3 million homes by the end of my first term. My work that is related to having a friend when I was in high school who was sexually assaulted by her stepfather. And my focus then on protecting women and children from violent crime is based on a value that is deeply grounded in the importance of standing up for those who are most vulnerable. My work that is about protecting Social Security and Medicare is based on long-standing work that I have done, protecting seniors from scams. My values have not changed. And what is important is that there is a president who actually brings values and a perspective that is about lifting people up and not beating people down and name-calling. The true measure of the leader is the leader who actually understands the strength is not in beating people down, it's in lifting people up. I intend to be that president.
President Trump, your
response? First of all, I wasn't given $400 million. I wish I was. My father was a Brooklyn builder, Brooklyn, Queens, and a great father, and I learned a lot from him. But I was given a fraction of that, a tiny fraction, and I built it into many, many billions of dollars, many, many billions. And when people see it, they are even surprised. So we don't have to talk about that. Fracking, she's been against it for 12 years. Defund the police, she's been against that forever. She gave all that stuff up very wrongly, very horribly, and everybody's laughing at it, okay? They're all laughing at it. She gave up at least 12 and probably 14 or 15 different policies. Like, she was big on defund the police. In Minnesota, she went out, wait a minute, I'm talking now, if you don't mind, please. Does that sound familiar? She went out in Minnesota and wanted to let criminals that killed people, that burned down Minneapolis, she went out and raised money to get them out of jail. She did things that nobody would ever think of. Now she wants to do transgender operations on illegal aliens that are in prison. This is a radical left liberal that would do this. She wants to confiscate your guns, and she will never allow fracking in Pennsylvania. If she won the election, fracking in Pennsylvania will end on day one. Just to finish, one thing so important in my opinion. So I got the oil business going like nobody has ever done before. When they took over, they got rid of it, started getting rid of it, and the prices were going up the roof. They immediately let these guys go to where they were. I would have been 5 times, 4 times, 5 times higher, because you're talking about 3.5 years ago. They got it up to where I was because they had no choice, because the prices of energy were quadrupling and doubling. You saw what happened to gasoline. So they said, let's go back to Trump. But if she won the election, the day after that election, they'll go back to destroying our country, and oil will be dead, fossil fuel will be dead, we'll go back to windmills, and we'll go back to solar, where they need a whole desert to get some energy to come out of. You ever see a solar plant? By the way, I'm a big fan of solar, but they take 400, 500 acres of desert
President
soil.
Trump, we have a
These
lot
are
of
not good
issues
things
that we
for the
have to get
environment
to.
that
We're
she
out of time.
understands.
Thank you.
Lindsay, thank you. We have an election in just 56 days. And I want to talk about the peaceful transfer of power, which, of course, we all know is a cornerstone of our democracy, and the role of a president in a moment of crisis. Mr. President, on January 6th, you told your supporters to march to the Capitol. You said you would be right there with them. The country and the world saw what played out at the Capitol that day, the officers coming under attack. Aides in the West Wing say you watched it unfold on television off the Oval Office. You did send out tweets, but it was more than 2 hours before you sent out that video message telling your supporters to go home. Is there anything you regret about what you did on that day?
You just said a thing that isn't covered. Peacefully and patriotically, I said during my speech, not later on. Peacefully and patriotically. And nobody on the other side was killed. Ashley Babbitt was shot by an out-of-control police officer that should have never, ever shot her. It's a disgrace. But we didn't do this group of people that have been treated so badly. I ask, what about all the people that are pouring into our country and killing people that she allowed to pour in? She was the border czar, remember that. She was the border czar. She doesn't want to be called the border czar because she's embarrassed by the border. In fact, she said at the beginning, well, I'm surprised you're not talking about the border yet. That's because she knows what a bad job they've done. What about those people? When are they going to be prosecuted? When are these people from countries all over the world, not just South America? They're coming in from all over the world, David, all over the world. And crime rates are down all over the world because of it.
But let me just ask you,
David, when are those people going to be prosecuted? When are the people that burned down Minneapolis going to be prosecuted? Or in Seattle? They went into Seattle. They took over a big percentage of the city of Seattle. When are those people going to be prosecuted?
But let me just ask you.
You might ask her that question.
You were the president. You were watching it unfold on television. It's a very simple question as we move forward toward another election. Is there anything you regret about what you did on that day? Yes, sir.
I had nothing to do with that other than they asked me to make a speech. I showed up for a speech. I said, I think it's going to be big. I went to Nancy Pelosi and the mayor of Washington, D.C., and the mayor put it back in writing, as you know. I said, you know, this is going to be a very big rally or whatever you want to call it. And again, it wasn't done by me. It was done by others. I said, I'd like to give you 10,000 National Guard or soldiers. They rejected me. Nancy Pelosi rejected me. It was just 2 weeks ago. Her daughter has a tape of her saying she is fully responsible for what happened. They want to get rid of that tape. It would have never happened if Nancy Pelosi and the mayor of Washington did their jobs. I wasn't responsible for security. Nancy Pelosi was responsible. She didn't do it.
It was about you as president, not about former Speaker Pelosi. But I do want Vice President Harris to respond here.
I was at the Capitol on January 6th. I was the vice president-elect. I was also an acting senator. I was there. And on that day, the President of the United States incited a violent mob to attack our nation's capital, to desecrate our nation's capital. On that day, 140 law enforcement officers were injured, and some died. And understand, the former president has been indicted and impeached for exactly that reason. But this is not an isolated situation. Let's remember Charlottesville, where there was a mob of people carrying tiki torches, spewing anti-Semitic hate. And what did the president then at the time say? There were fine people on each side. Let's remember that when it came to the Proud Boys, a militia, the president said, the former president said, stand back and stand by. So for everyone watching who remembers what January 6th was, I say we don't have to go back. Let's not go back. We're not going back. It's time to turn the page. And if that was a bridge too far for you, well, there is a place in our campaign for you to stand for country, to stand for our democracy, to stand for rule of law, and to end the chaos, and to end the approach that is about attacking the foundations of our democracy because you don't like the outcome. And be clear on that point. Donald Trump, the candidate, has said in this election there will be a bloodbath if this and the outcome of this election is not to his liking. Let's turn the page on this. Let's not go back. Let's chart a course for the future and not go backwards to the past.
Let me just follow up here.
It was a different term, and it was a term that related to energy because they have destroyed our energy business. That was where bloodbath was. Also, on Charlottesville, that story has been, as you would say, debunked. Laura Ingraham, Sean Hannity, Jesse, all of these people, they covered it. If they go an extra sentence, they will see it was perfect. It was debunked in almost every newspaper, but they still bring it up, just like they bring 2025 up. They bring all of this stuff up. I ask you this. You talk about the Capitol. Why are we allowing these millions of people to come through on the southern border? How come she's not doing anything? And I'll tell you what I would do, and I would be very proud to do it. I would say we would both leave this debate right now. I'd like to see her go down to Washington, D.C. during this debate because we're wasting a lot of time. Go down to, because she's been so bad, it's so ridiculous. Go down to Washington, D.C. and let her sign a bill to close up the border because they have the right to do it. They don't need bills. They have the right to do it. The President of the United States, you'll get him out of bed. You'll wake him up at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. Right. You'll say, come on down to the office. Let's sign a bill. If he signs a bill that the border is closed, all he has to do is say it to the Border Patrol, who are phenomenal. If they do that, the border is closed.
Mr.
Those
President,
people are killing many people, unlike J6.
We talked immigration here tonight. I do want to focus on this next issue to both of you because it really brings us this into focus, truth in these times that we're living in. Mr. President, for 3.5 years after you lost the 2020 election, you repeatedly falsely claimed that you won, many times saying you won in a landslide. In the past couple of weeks leading up to this debate, you have said, quote, you lost by a whisker, that you, quote, didn't quite make it, that you came up a little bit short.
I said that?
Are you now acknowledging that you lost in 2020?
No, I don't acknowledge that at all.
But
I
you
said
did
that
say
sarcastically.
That.
You know that. It was said, oh, we lost by a whisker. That was said sarcastically. Look, there's so much proof. All you have to do is look at it. And they should have sent it back to the legislatures for approval. I got almost 75 million votes, the most votes any sitting president has ever gotten. I was told if I got 63, which was what I got in 2016, you can't be beaten. The election, people should never be thinking about an election as fraudulent. We need two things. We need walls, and we have to have it. We have to have borders, and we have to have good elections. Our elections are bad. And a lot of these illegal immigrants coming in, they're trying to get them to vote. They can't even speak English. They don't even know what country they're in practically. And these people are trying to get them to vote. And that's why they're allowing them to come into our country.
I did watch all of these pieces of video. I didn't detect the sarcasm, lost by a whisker. We didn't quite make it. And we should just point out here as clarification, and you know this, you and your allies, 60 cases in front of many judges, many of them Republican.
No judge looked at it.
And said
they
there was
said
no
we didn't have
widespread
standing.
fraud.
That's the other thing. They said we didn't have standing, a technicality. Can you imagine a system where a person in an election doesn't have standing? The president of the United States doesn't have standing. That's how we lost. If you look at the facts, and I'd love to have you'll do a special on it. I'll show you Georgia, and I'll show you Wisconsin, and I'll show you Pennsylvania, and I'll show you. We have so many facts and statistics, but you know what? That doesn't matter, because we have to solve the problem that we have right now. That's old news. And the problem that we have right now is we have a nation in decline, and they have put it into decline. We have a nation that is dying, David.
Mr. President, thank you. Vice President Harris, you heard the president there tonight. He said he didn't say that he lost by a whisker. So he still believes he did not lose the election that was won by President Biden and yourself. But I do want to ask you about something that's come up in the last couple of days. This was a post from President Trump about this upcoming election just weeks away. He said, when I win, those people who cheated, and then he lists donors, voters, election officials, he says will be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law, which will include long-term prison sentences. One of your campaign's top lawyers responded saying, we won't let Donald Trump intimidate us. We won't let him suppress the vote. Is that what you believe he's trying to do here?
Donald Trump was fired by 81 million people. So let's be clear about that. And clearly he is having a very difficult time processing that. But we cannot afford to have a president of the United States who attempts, as he did in the past, to upend the will of the voters in a free and fair election. And I'm going to tell you that I have traveled the world as Vice President of the United States, and world leaders are laughing at Donald Trump. I have talked with military leaders, some of whom worked with you, and they say you're a disgrace. And when you then talk in this way in a presidential debate and deny what over and over again are court cases you have lost because you did, in fact, lose that election, it leads one to believe that perhaps we do not have in the candidate to my right the temperament or the ability to not be confused about fact. That's deeply troubling, and the American people deserve better.
I'll give you 1 minute to respond, Mr. President.
Let me just say about world leaders. Viktor Orban, one of the most respected men, they call him a strong man. He's a tough person, smart. Prime Minister of Hungary. They said, why is the whole world blowing up? 3 years ago, it wasn't. Why is it blowing up? He said, because you need Trump back as president. They were afraid of him. China was afraid, and I don't like to use the word afraid, but I'm just quoting him. China was afraid of him. North Korea was afraid of him. Look at what's going on with North Korea, by the way. He said Russia was afraid of him. I ended the Nord Stream 2 pipeline, and Biden put it back on day one, but he ended the XL pipeline. The XL pipeline in our country, he ended that. But he let the Russians build a pipeline going all over Europe and heading into Germany, the biggest pipeline in the world. Look, Viktor Orban said it. He said the most respected, most feared person is Donald Trump. We had no problems when Trump was president. But when this weak, pathetic man that you saw at a debate just a few months ago, that if he weren't in that debate, he'd be running instead of her. She got no votes. He got 14 million votes. What you did, you talk about a threat to democracy. He got 14 million votes, and they threw him out of office. And you know what? I'll give you a little secret. He hates her. He can't stand her. But he got 14 million votes. They threw him out. She got 0 votes. And when she ran, she was the first one to leave because she failed. And now she's running. I don't understand it, but I'm okay with it because
your time
I
is
think
up.
we're going to do very well.
We've got a lot more to get to.
Turning now to the Israel-Hamas war and the hostages who are still being held, Americans among them. Vice President Harris, in December, you said, quote, Israel has a right to defend itself, but you added, quote, it matters how, saying international humanitarian law must be respected. Israel must do more to protect innocent civilians. You said that 9 months ago. Now an estimated 40,000 Palestinians are dead. Nearly 100 hostages remain. Just last week, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said there's not a deal in the making. President Biden has not been able to break through the stalemate. How would you do it?
Well, let's understand how we got here. On October 7, Hamas, a terrorist organization, slaughtered 1,200 Israelis. Many of them young people who were simply attending a concert. Women were horribly raped. And so absolutely, I said then, I say now, Israel has a right to defend itself. We would. And how it does so matters. Because it is also true, far too many innocent Palestinians have been killed. Children, mothers. What we know is that this war must end. It must end immediately, and the way it will end is we need a ceasefire deal and we need the hostages out. And so we will continue to work around the clock on that. Work around the clock, also understanding that we must chart a course for a two-state solution. And in that solution, there must be security for the Israeli people and Israel, and in equal measure for the Palestinians. But the one thing I will assure you always, I will always give Israel the ability to defend itself, in particular as it relates to Iran and any threat that Iran and its proxies pose to Israel. But we must have a two-state solution where we can rebuild Gaza, where the Palestinians have security, self-determination, and the dignity they so rightly deserve.
President Trump, how would you negotiate with Netanyahu and also Hamas in order to get the hostages out and prevent the killing of more innocent civilians in Gaza?
If I were president, it would have never started. If I were president, Russia would have never, ever, I know Putin very well, he would have never, and there was no threat of it either, by the way, for 4 years, have gone into Ukraine and killed millions of people when you add it up, far worse than people understand what's going on over there. But when she mentions about Israel, all of a sudden, she hates Israel. She wouldn't even meet with Netanyahu when he went to Congress to make a very important speech. She refused to be there because she was at a sorority party of hers. She wanted to go to the sorority party. She hates Israel. If she's president, I believe that Israel will not exist within 2 years from now. And I've been pretty good at predictions, and I hope I'm wrong about that one. She hates Israel. At the same time, in her own way, she hates the Arab population because the whole place is going to get blown up. Arabs, Jewish people, Israel will be gone. It would have never happened. Iran was broke under Donald Trump. Now Iran has $300 billion because they took off all the sanctions that I had. Iran had no money for Hamas or Hezbollah or any of the 28 different spheres of terror, and they are spheres of terror, horrible terror. They had no money. It was a big story, and you know it. You covered it very well, actually. They had no money for terror. They were broke. Now they're a rich nation, and now what they're doing is they're spreading that money around. Look at what's happening with the Houthis and Yemen. Look at what's going on in the Middle East. This would have never happened. I will get that settled and fast, and I'll get the war with Ukraine and Russia ended. If I'm president-elect, I'll get it done before even becoming president.
Vice President Harris, he says you hate Israel.
That's absolutely not true. I have my entire career and life supported Israel and the Israeli people. He knows that. He's trying to, again, divide and distract from the reality, which is it is very well known that Donald Trump is weak and wrong on national security and foreign policy. It is well known that he admires dictators, wants to be a dictator on day one, according to himself. It is well known that he said of Putin that he can do whatever the hell he wants and go into Ukraine. It is well known that he said when Russia went into Ukraine, it was brilliant. It is well known he exchanged love letters with Kim Jong-un, and it is absolutely well known that these dictators and autocrats are rooting for you to be president again because they're so clear they can manipulate you with flattery and favors. And that is why so many military leaders who you have worked with have told me you are a disgrace. That is why we understand that we have to have a president who is not consistently weak and wrong on national security, including the importance of upholding and respecting in highest regard our military.
Vice President Harris, thank you.
They're the ones, and she's the one that caused it, that's weak on national security by allowing every nation last month for the year, 168 different countries sending people into our country. Their crime rates are way down. Putin endorsed her last week, said, I hope she wins. And I think he meant it, because what he's gotten away with is absolutely incredible. It wouldn't have happened with me. The leaders of other countries think that they're weak and incompetent, and they are. They're grossly incompetent. And I just ask one question. Why does Biden go in and kill the Keystone Pipeline and approve the single biggest deal that Russia's ever made, Nord Stream 2, the biggest pipeline anywhere in the world going to Germany and all over Europe? Because they're weak and they're ineffective. And Biden, by the way,
President
gets paid
Trump,
a lot of money.
Thank you. We have a lot of issues to get to.
And I want to turn to the war in Ukraine. We're now 2.5 years into this conflict. Mr. President, it has been the position of the Biden administration that we must defend Ukraine from Russia, from Vladimir Putin, to defend their sovereignty, their democracy, that it's in America's best interest to do so, arguing that if Putin wins, he may be emboldened to move even further into other countries. You have said you would solve this war in 24 hours. You said so just before the break tonight. How exactly would you do that? And I want to ask you a very simple question tonight. Do you want Ukraine to win this war?
I want the war to stop. I want to save lives that are being uselessly, people being killed by the millions. It's the millions. It's so much worse than the numbers that you're getting, which are fake numbers. Look, we're in for $250 billion or more because they don't ask Europe, which is a much bigger beneficiary to getting this thing done than we are. They're in for $150 billion less because Biden and you don't have the courage to ask Europe like I did with NATO. They paid billions and billions, hundreds of billions of dollars when I said, either you pay up or we're not going to protect you anymore. So that's maybe one of the reasons they don't like me as much as they like weak people. But you take a look at what's happening. We're in for 250 to 275 billion. They're into 100 to 150. They should be forced to equalize. With that being said, I want to get the war settled. I know Zelensky very well, and I know Putin very well. I have a good relationship, and they respect your president, okay? They respect me. They don't respect Biden. How would you respect him? Why? For what reason? He hasn't even made a phone call in 2 years to Putin, hasn't spoken to anybody. They don't even try and get it. That is a war that's dying to be settled. I will get it settled before I even become president. If I win, when I'm president-elect, and what I'll do is I'll speak to one, I'll speak to the other, I'll get them together. That war would have never happened. And in fact, when I saw Putin after I left, unfortunately left because our country has gone to hell. But after I left, when I saw him building up soldiers, he did it after I left, I said, oh, he must be negotiating. It must be a good, strong point of negotiation. Well, it wasn't, because Biden had no idea how to talk to him. He had no idea how to stop it. And now you have millions of people dead, and it's only getting worse, and it could lead to World War III. Don't kid yourself, David. We're playing with World War III, and we have a president that we don't even know if he's... Where is our president? We don't even know if he's a president.
And just to clarify
they
here...
threw him out of a campaign like a dog. We don't even know. Is he our president? But we have a president,
Mr. President,
that doesn't know he's alive.
Your time is up. Just to clarify in the question, do you believe it's in the U.S. best interest for Ukraine to win this war, yes or no?
I think it's the U.S. best interest to get this war finished and just get it done.
All right.
Negotiate a deal, because we have to stop all of these human lives from being destroyed.
I want to take this to Vice President Harris. I want to get your thoughts on support for Ukraine in this moment, but also, as Commander-in-Chief, if elected, how would you deal with Vladimir Putin, and would it be any different from what we're seeing from President Biden?
Well, first of all, it's important to remind the former president you're not running against Joe Biden, you're running against me. I believe the reason that Donald Trump says that this war would be over within 24 hours is because he would just give it up. And that's not who we are as Americans. Let's understand what happened here. I actually met with Zelensky a few days before Russia invaded, tried through force to change territorial boundaries, to defy one of the most important international rules and norms, which is the importance of sovereignty and territorial integrity. And I met with President Zelensky. I shared with him American intelligence about how he could defend himself. Days later, I went to NATO's eastern flank, to Poland and Romania. And through the work that I and others did, we brought 50 countries together to support Ukraine in its righteous defense. And because of our support, because of the air defense, the ammunition, the artillery, the javelins, the Abrams tanks that we have provided, Ukraine stands as an independent and free country. If Donald Trump were president, Putin would be sitting in Kyiv right now. And understand what that would mean, because Putin's agenda is not just about Ukraine. Understand why the European allies and our NATO allies are so thankful that you are no longer president, and that we understand the importance of the greatest military alliance the world has ever known, which is NATO, and what we have done to preserve the ability of Zelensky and the Ukrainians to fight for their independence. Otherwise, Putin would be sitting in Kyiv with his eyes on the rest of Europe, starting with Poland. And why don't you tell the 800,000 Polish Americans right here in Pennsylvania how quickly you would give up for the sake of favor and what you think is a friendship with what is known to be a dictator who would eat you for lunch.
Vice President Harris, thank you. We've heard from both of you on Ukraine tonight. Afghanistan came up in the last hour. I wanted her to respond to something you said earlier, and please, I'll give you a minute here.
Putin would be sitting in Moscow, and he wouldn't have lost 300,000 men and women, but he would have been sitting in Moscow. Quiet, please. He would have been sitting in Moscow, much happier than he is right now. But eventually, you know, he's got a thing that other people don't have. He's got nuclear weapons. They don't ever talk about that. He's got nuclear weapons. Nobody ever thinks about that. And eventually, maybe he'll use them, and maybe he hasn't been that threatening, but he does have that. Something we don't even like to talk about. Nobody likes to talk about it. But just so you understand, they sent her to negotiate peace before this war started. 3 days later, he went in and he started the war because everything they said was weak and stupid. They said the wrong things. That war should have never started. She was the emissary. They sent her in to negotiate with Zelensky and Putin, and she did. And the war started 3 days later. And that's the kind of talent we have with her. She's worse than Biden. In my opinion, I think he's the worst president in the history of our country. She goes down as the worst vice president in the history of our country. But let me tell you something. She is a horrible negotiator. They sent her in to negotiate. As soon as they left, Putin did the invasion.
President Trump, thank you. You did bring up something. You said she went to negotiate with Vladimir Putin. Vice President Harris, have you ever met Vladimir Putin? Can you clarify tonight?
Yet again, I said it at the beginning of this debate, you're going to hear a bunch of lies coming from this fellow. And that is another one. When I went to meet with President Zelensky, I've now met with him over 5 times. The reality is it has been about standing as America always should, as a leader upholding international rules and norms, as a leader who shows strength, understanding that the alliances we have around the world are dependent on our ability to look out for our friends and not favor our enemies because you adore strongmen instead of caring about democracy. And that is very much what is at stake here. The President of the United States is commander-in-chief. And the American people have a right to rely on a president who understands the significance of America's role and responsibility in terms of ensuring that there is stability and ensuring we stand up for our principles and not sell them for the benefit of personal flattery.
We've talked about Ukraine and Vladimir Putin. I do want to talk about Afghanistan. It came up in the first hour of this debate. I want to move on to Afghanistan.
Stoltenberg said Trump did the most amazing thing I've ever seen. He got these countries, the 28 countries at the time, to pay up. He said, I've never seen, he's the head of NATO. He said, I've never seen. For years, we were paying almost all of NATO. We were being ripped off by European nations, both on trade and on NATO. I got them to pay up by saying one of the statements you made before, if you don't pay, we're not going to protect you.
President
Otherwise,
Trump.
we would have never gotten it. He said it was one of the most incredible jobs that he's ever seen done.
Thank you. I want to turn to Afghanistan. It came up in the first hour of the debate, and we witnessed a poignant moment today on Capitol Hill, honoring the soldiers who died in the chaotic withdrawal from Afghanistan. I do want to ask the Vice President, do you believe you bear any responsibility in the way that withdrawal played out?
Well, I will tell you, I agreed with President Biden's decision to pull out of Afghanistan. 4 presidents said they would, and Joe Biden did. And as a result, America's taxpayers are not paying the $300 million a day we were paying for that endless war. And as of today, there is not one member of the United States military who is in active duty in a combat zone in any war zone around the world, the first time this century. But let's understand how we got to where we are. Donald Trump, when he was president, negotiated one of the weakest deals you can imagine. He calls himself a deal maker. Even his national security advisor said it was a weak, terrible deal. And here's how it went down. He bypassed the Afghan government. He negotiated directly with a terrorist organization called the Taliban. The negotiation involved the Taliban getting 5,000 Taliban terrorists released. And get this, and the president at the time invited the Taliban to Camp David, a place of storied significance for us as Americans, a place where we honor the importance of American diplomacy, where we invite and receive respected world leaders. And this former president, as president, invited them to Camp David because he does not again appreciate the role and responsibility of the President of the United States to be commander-in-chief with a level of respect. And this gets back to the point of how he has consistently disparaged and demeaned members of our military, fallen soldiers, and the work that we must do to uphold the strength and the respect of the United States of America around the world.
Vice President Harris, thank you. President Trump, your response to her saying that you began the negotiations with the Taliban.
So if you take a look at that period of time, the Taliban was killing our soldiers, a lot of them, with snipers. And I got involved with the Taliban because the Taliban was doing the killing. That's the fighting force within Afghanistan. They don't bother doing that because, you know, they deal with the wrong people all the time. But I got involved. And Abdul is the head of the Taliban. He is still the head of the Taliban. And I told Abdul, don't do it anymore. You do it anymore, you're going to have problems. And he said, why do you send me a picture of my house? I said, you're going to have to figure that out, Abdul. And for 18 months, we had nobody killed. We did have an agreement negotiated by Mike Pompeo. It was a very good agreement. The reason it was good, it was we were getting out. We would have been out faster than them, but we wouldn't have lost the soldiers. We wouldn't have left many Americans behind, and we wouldn't have left $85 billion worth of brand new, beautiful military equipment behind. And just to finish, they blew it. The agreement said you have to do this, this, and they didn't do it. They didn't do it. The agreement was terminated by us because they didn't do what they were supposed to do.
I want to move on.
And these people did the worst withdrawal and, in my opinion, the most embarrassing moment in the history of our country. And by the way, that's why Russia attacked Ukraine, because they saw how incompetent she and her boss are.
President Trump, thank you. I want to move on now to race and politics in this country. Mr. President, you recently said of Vice President Harris, quote, "I didn't know she was black until a number of years ago when she happened to turn black, and now she wants to be known as black." I want to ask a bigger picture question here tonight. Why do you believe it's appropriate to weigh in on the racial identity of your opponent?
I don't, and I don't care. I don't care what she is. I don't care. You make a big deal out of something, I couldn't care less. Whatever she wants to be is okay with me.
But those were your words, so I'm
I
asking.
I don't know. I mean, all I can say is I read where she was not black, that she put out, and I'll say that. And then I read that she was black, and that's okay. Either one was okay with me. That's up to her. That's up to her.
Vice President Harris, your thoughts on this?
I think it's, I mean, honestly, I think it's a tragedy that we have someone who wants to be president who has consistently, over the course of his career, attempted to use race to divide the American people. You know, I do believe that the vast majority of us know that we have so much more in common than what separates us, and we don't want this kind of approach that is just constantly trying to divide us, and especially by race. And let's remember how Donald Trump started. He was land, he owned buildings, and he was investigated because he refused to rent property to black families. Let's remember, this is the same individual who took out a full-page ad in the New York Times calling for the execution of 5 young black and Latino boys who were innocent, the Central Park 5. Took out a full-page ad calling for their execution. This is the same individual who spread birther lies about the first black president of the United States. And I think the American people want better than that, want better than this, want someone who understands, as I do, I travel our country. We see in each other a friend. We see in each other a neighbor. We don't want a leader who is constantly trying to have Americans point their fingers at each other. I meet with people all the time who tell me, can we please just have discourse about how we're going to invest in the aspirations and the ambitions and the dreams of the American people? Knowing that regardless of people's color or the language their grandmother speaks, we all have the same dreams and aspirations and want a president who invests in those, not in hate and division.
Vice President Harris, thank you. Lindsay?
President Trump, this is now your 3rd time.
This is the most divisive presidency in the history of our country. There's never been anything like it. They're destroying our country, and they come up with things like what she just said. Going back many, many years, when a lot of people, including Mayor Bloomberg, agreed with me on the Central Park 5, they admitted, they said, they pled guilty. And I said, well, if they pled guilty, they badly hurt a person, killed a person ultimately. And if they pled guilty, then they pled, we're not guilty. But this is a person that has to stretch back years, 40, 50 years ago, because there's nothing now. I built one of the greatest economies in the history of the world, and I'm going to build it again. It's going to be bigger, better, and stronger. But they're destroying our economy. They have no idea what a good economy is. Their oil policies, every single policy. And remember this, she is Biden. You know, she's trying to get away from Biden. I don't know the gentleman, she says. She is Biden. The worst inflation we've ever had, a horrible economy because inflation has made it so bad, and she can't get away with that.
Thank you. Your time is up, Lindsay.
I want to respond to that, though. I want to just respond briefly. Clearly, I am not Joe Biden, and I am certainly not Donald Trump. And what I do offer is a new generation of leadership for our country, one who believes in what is possible, one who brings a sense of optimism about what we can do instead of always disparaging the American people. I believe in what we can do to strengthen our small businesses, which is why I have a plan. Let's talk about our plans and let's compare the plans. I have a plan to give startup businesses $50,000 tax deduction, to pursue their ambitions, their innovation, their ideas, their hard work. I have a plan, $6,000 for young families for the first year of your child's life to help you in that most critical stage of your child's development. I have a plan that is about allowing people to be able to pursue what has been fleeting in terms of the American dream by offering a help with down payment of $25,000 down payment assistance for first-time home buyers. That's the kind of conversation, I believe, David, that people really want tonight, as opposed to a conversation that is constantly about belittling and name-calling. Let's turn the page
Vice President
and move
Harris,
forward.
thank you. Let's turn to policy.
President
Let's
Trump,
turn back
we
to
have
policy.
to move on. President Trump.
Let's turn to policy,
She
please.
has a plan to defund the police. She has a plan to confiscate everybody's gun.
President Trump,
she
we
has
do
a
have to
plan
move
to
on to
not
other
allow
issues.
fracking in Pennsylvania or anywhere else.
Okay.
Thank you,
That's
Mr.
what her
President.
plan is until just recently.
I just need
Lindsay,
to
go ahead.
respond
President
because
Trump,
the
President
former
Trump,
president has said
no, I'm
something
sorry.
twice that I need to respond to.
I'm sorry.
I
We're
just
going
need
to
to
move
respond
on, Vice
one
President
time
Harris.
to what he has
President
said
Trump, this
multiple
is now
times.
your
Yes.
third time running for president. You have long vowed to repeal and replace the Affordable Care Act, also known as Obamacare. You have failed to accomplish that. You now say you're going to keep Obamacare, quote, unless we can do something much better.
Correct.
Last month, you said, quote, we're working on it. So tonight, 9 years after you first started running, do you have a plan, and can you tell us what it is?
Obamacare was lousy health care, always was. It's not very good today. And what I said, that if we come up with something, and we are working on things, we're going to do it and we're going to replace it. But remember this, I inherited Obamacare because Democrats wouldn't change it. They wouldn't vote for it. They were unanimous. They wouldn't vote to change it. If they would have done that, we would have had a much better plan than Obamacare. But the Democrats came up. They wouldn't vote for it. I had a choice to make when I was president. Do I save it and make it as good as it can be, never going to be great, or do I let it rot? And I felt I had an obligation, even though politically it would have been good to just let it rot and let it go away. I decided, and I told my people, the top people, and they're very good people. I have a lot of good people in that administration. We read about the bad ones. We had some real bad ones, too, and so do they. They have really bad ones. The difference is they don't get rid of them. But let me just explain. I had a choice to make. Do I save it and make it as good as it can be, or do I let it rot? And I saved it. I did the right thing. But it's still never going to be great, and it's too expensive for people. And what we will do is we're looking at different plans. If we can come up with a plan that's going to cost our people, our population, less money and be better health care than Obamacare, then I would absolutely do it. But until then, I'd run it as good as it can be run.
So just a yes or no, you still do not have a plan?
I have concepts of a plan. I'm not president right now. But if we come up with something, I would only change it if we come up with something that's better and less expensive. And there are concepts and options we have to do that. And you'll be hearing about it in the not-too-distant future.
Vice President Harris, in 2017, you supported Bernie Sanders' proposal to do away with private insurance and create a government-run health care system. 2 years later, you proposed a plan that included a private insurance option. What is your plan today?
Well, first of all, I absolutely support, and over the last 4 years as vice president, private health care options. But what we need to do is maintain and grow the Affordable Care Act. But I'll get to that, Lindsay. I just need to respond to a previous point that the former president has made. I've made very clear my position on fracking. And then this business about taking everyone's guns away. Tim Walz and I are both gun owners. We're not taking anybody's guns away. So stop with the continuous lying about this stuff. As it relates to the Affordable Care Act, understand, just look at the history to know where people stand. When Donald Trump was president, 60 times he tried to get rid of the Affordable Care Act. 60 times. I was a senator at the time when I will never forget the early morning hours when it was up for a vote in the United States Senate. And the late, great John McCain, who you have disparaged as being, you don't like him, you said, at the time because he got caught. He was an American hero. The late, great John McCain, I will never forget that night, walked onto the Senate floor and said, no, you don't. No, you don't. No, you don't get rid of the Affordable Care Act. You have no plan. And what the Affordable Care Act has done is eliminate the ability of insurance companies to deny people with pre-existing conditions. I don't have to tell the people watching tonight, you remember what that was like? Remember when an insurance company could deny if a child had asthma, if someone was a breast cancer survivor, if a grandparent had diabetes? And thankfully, as I've been vice president, and we, over the last 4 years, have strengthened the Affordable Care Act, we have allowed for the first time Medicare to negotiate drug prices on behalf of you, the American people. Donald Trump said he was going to allow Medicare to negotiate drug prices. He never did. We did. And now we have capped the cost of insulin at $35 a month. Since I've been vice president, we have capped the cost of prescription medication for seniors at $2,000 a year. And when I am president, we will do that for all people, understanding that the value I bring to this is that access to health care should be a right and not just a privilege of those who can afford it. And the plan has to be to strengthen the Affordable Care Act, not get rid of it,
Vice President Harris,
in terms of where Donald Trump stands on that.
I want to move to an issue that's important for a lot of...
She made a mistake. Number one, John McCain fought Obamacare for 10 years. But it wasn't only him. It were all of the Democrats that kept it going. And you know what? We can do much better than Obamacare, much less money. But she won't improve private insurance for people, private medical insurance. That's another thing she doesn't want to give. People are paying privately for insurance that have worked hard and made money, and they want to have private. She wants everybody to be on government insurance where you wait 6 months for an operation that you need immediately.
President Trump, thank you. We have another issue that we'd like to get to that's important for a number of Americans, in particular younger voters, and that's climate change. President Trump, with regard to the environment, you say that we have to have clean air and clean water. Vice President Harris, you call climate change an existential threat. The question to you both tonight is, what would you do to fight climate change? And Vice President Harris, we'll start with you. 1 minute for you each.
Well, the former president had said that climate change is a hoax. And what we know is that it is very real. You ask anyone who lives in a state who has experienced these extreme weather occurrences, who now is either being denied home insurance or it's being jacked up. You ask anybody who has been the victim of what that means in terms of losing their home, having nowhere to go. We know that we can actually deal with this issue. The young people of America care deeply about this issue. And I am proud that as vice president over the last 4 years, we have invested $1 trillion in a clean energy economy, while we have also increased domestic gas production to historic levels. We have created over 800,000 new manufacturing jobs while I have been vice president. We have invested in clean energy to the point that we are opening up factories around the world. Donald Trump said he was going to create manufacturing jobs. He lost manufacturing jobs. And I'm also proud to have the endorsement of the United Auto Workers and Sean Fain, who also know that part of building a clean energy economy includes investing in American-made products, American automobiles. It includes growing what we can do around American manufacturing and opening up auto plants, not closing them like happened under Donald Trump.
Vice President Harris, thank you.
It didn't happen under Donald Trump. Let me just tell you, they lost 10,000 manufacturing jobs this last month. It's going, they're all leaving. They're building big auto plants in Mexico, in many cases owned by China. They're building these massive plants, and they think they're going to sell their cars into the United States because of these people. What they have given to China is unbelievable. But we're not going to let that. We'll put tariffs on those cars so they can't come into our country, because they will kill the United Auto Workers and any auto worker, whether it's in Detroit or South Carolina or any other place. What they've done to business and manufacturing in this country is horrible. We have nothing because they refuse. You know, Biden doesn't go after people because supposedly China paid him millions of dollars. He's afraid to do it. Between him and his son, they get all this money from Ukraine. They get all this money from all of these different countries. And then you wonder, why is he so loyal to this one, that one, Ukraine, China? Why is he? Why did he get $3.5 million from the mayor of Moscow's wife? Why did she pay him $3.5 million? This is a crooked administration, and they're selling our country down the tubes.
President Trump, thank you.
Thank you.
tonight. The time has come for closing statements, and Vice President Harris, we begin with you.
So I think you've heard tonight two very different visions for our country. One that is focused on the future, and the other that is focused on the past, and an attempt to take us backward. But we're not going back. And I do believe that the American people know we all have so much more in common than what separates us. And we can chart a new way forward. And a vision of that includes having a plan, understanding the aspirations, the dreams, the hopes, the ambition of the American people, which is why I intend to create an opportunity economy, investing in small businesses, in new families, in what we can do around protecting seniors, what we can do that is about giving hardworking folks a break and bringing down the cost of living. I believe in what we can do together that is about sustaining America's standing in the world and ensuring that we have the respect that we so rightly deserve, including respecting our military and ensuring we have the most lethal fighting force in the world. I will be a president that will protect our fundamental rights and freedoms, including the right of a woman to make decisions about her own body and not have her government tell her what to do. I'll tell you, I started my career as a prosecutor. I was a DA, I was an attorney general, a United States senator, and now vice president. I've only had one client, the people. And I'll tell you, as a prosecutor, I never asked a victim or a witness, are you a Republican or a Democrat? The only thing I ever asked them, are you okay? And that's the kind of president we need right now. Someone who cares about you and is not putting themselves first. I intend to be a president for all Americans and focus on what we can do over the next 10 and 20 years to build back up our country by investing right now in you, the American people.
Vice President Harris, thank you. President Trump?
So she just started by saying she's going to do this, she's going to do that, she's going to do all these wonderful things. Why hasn't she done it? She's been there for 3.5 years. They've had 3.5 years to fix the border. They've had 3.5 years to create jobs and all the things we talked about. Why hasn't she done it? She should leave right now, go down to that beautiful White House, go to the Capitol, get everyone together and do the things you want to do, but you haven't done it, and you won't do it because you believe in things that the American people don't believe in. You believe in things like we're not going to frack. We're not going to take fossil fuel. We're not going to do things that are going to make this country strong, whether you like it or not. Germany tried that, and within 1 year, they were back to building normal energy plants. We're not ready for it. We can't sacrifice our country for the sake of bad vision. But I just ask one simple question. Why didn't she do it? We're a failing nation. We're a nation that's in serious decline. We're being laughed at all over the world. All over the world, they're laughed. I know the leaders very well. They're coming to see me. They call me. We're laughed at all over the world. They don't understand what happened to us as a nation. We're not a leader. We don't have any idea what's going on. We have wars going on in the Middle East. We have wars going on with Russia and Ukraine. We're going to end up in a third world war, and it'll be a war like no other because of nuclear weapons, the power of weaponry. I rebuilt our entire military. She gave a lot of it away to the Taliban. She gave it to Afghanistan. What these people have done to our country, and maybe toughest of all, is allowing millions of people to come into our country. Many of them are criminals, and they're destroying our country. The worst president, the worst vice president in the history of our country.
Kamala Harris. Let's have a good debate.
Nice to see you. Have fun.
Thank you.
Welcome to you both. It's wonderful to have you. It's an honor to have you both here tonight.
Good evening. We are looking forward to a spirited and thoughtful debate.
So let's get started. I want to begin tonight with the issue that voters repeatedly say is their #1 issue, and that is the economy and the cost of living in this country. Vice President Harris, you and President Trump were elected 4 years ago, and your opponent on the stage here tonight often asks his supporters, are you better off than you were 4 years ago? When it comes to the economy, do you believe Americans are better off than they were 4 years ago?
So I was raised as a middle-class kid. And I am actually the only person on this stage who has a plan that is about lifting up the middle class and working people of America. I believe in the ambition, the aspirations, the dreams of the American people. And that is why I imagine and have actually a plan to build what I call an opportunity economy. Because here's the thing. We know that we have a shortage of homes and housing, and the cost of housing is too expensive for far too many people. We know that young families need support to raise their children, and I intend on extending a tax cut for those families of $6,000, which is the largest child tax credit that we have given in a long time, so that those young families can afford to buy a crib, buy a car seat, buy clothes for their children. My passion, one of them, is small businesses. My mother raised my sister and me, but there was a woman who helped raise us. We call her our second mother. She was a small business owner. I love our small businesses. My plan is to give a $50,000 tax deduction to start up small businesses, knowing they are part of the backbone of America's economy. My opponent, on the other hand, his plan is to do what he has done before, which is to provide a tax cut for billionaires and big corporations, which will result in $5 trillion to America's deficit. My opponent has a plan that I call the Trump's sales tax, which would be a 20% tax on everyday goods that you rely on to get through the month. Economists have said that that Trump sales tax would actually result for middle-class families in about $4,000 more a year because of his policies and his ideas about what should be the backs of middle-class people paying for tax cuts for billionaires.
President Trump, I'll give you 2 minutes.
First of all, I have no sales tax. That's an incorrect statement. She knows that. We're doing tariffs on other countries. Other countries are going to finally, after 75 years, pay us back for all that we've done for the world. And the tariff will be substantial in some cases. I took in billions and billions of dollars, as you know, from China. In fact, they never took the tariff off because there was so much money they can't. It would totally destroy everything that they've set out to do. They're taking in billions of dollars from China and other places. They've left the tariffs on. When I had it, I had tariffs, and yet I had no inflation. Look, we've had a terrible economy because inflation which is really known as a country buster. It breaks up countries. We have inflation like very few people have ever seen before, probably the worst in our nation's history. We were at 21%, but that's being generous because many things are 50, 60, 70, and 80% higher than they were just a few years ago. This has been a disaster for people, for the middle class, but for every class. On top of that, we have millions of people pouring into our country from prisons and jails, from mental institutions and insane asylums, and they're coming in and they're taking jobs that are occupied right now by African Americans and Hispanics, and also unions. Unions are going to be affected very soon. And you see what's happening. You see what's happening with towns throughout the United States. You look at Springfield, Ohio. You look at Aurora violently. These are the people that she and Biden led into our country, and they're destroying our country. They're dangerous. They're at the highest level of criminality. And we have to get them out. We have to get them out fast. I created one of the greatest economies in the history of our country. I'll do it again and even better.
We are going to get to immigration and border security during this debate, but I would like to let Vice President Harris respond on the economy here.
Well, I would love to. Let's talk about what Donald Trump left us. Donald Trump left us the worst unemployment since the Great Depression. Donald Trump left us the worst public health epidemic in a century. Donald Trump left us the worst attack on our democracy since the Civil War. And what we have done is clean up Donald Trump's mess. What we have done and what I intend to do is build on what we know are the aspirations and the hopes of the American people. But I'm going to tell you all in this debate tonight, you're going to hear from the same old tired playbook, a bunch of lies, grievances, and name-calling. What you're going to hear tonight is a detailed and dangerous plan called Project 2025 that the former president intends on implementing if he were elected again. I believe very strongly that the American people want a president who understands the importance of bringing us together, knowing we have so much more in common than what separates us. And I pledge to you to be a president for all Americans.
President Trump will give you a minute here to respond.
Number one, I have nothing to do, as you know, and as she knows better than anyone, I have nothing to do with Project 2025. That's out there. I haven't read it. I don't want to read it purposely. I'm not going to read it. This was a group of people that got together. They came up with some ideas, I guess some good, some bad, but it makes no difference. I have nothing to do. Everybody knows I'm an open book. Everybody knows what I'm going to do. Cut taxes very substantially and create a great economy like I did before. We had the greatest economy. We got hit with a pandemic, and the pandemic was not since 1917, where 100 million people died, has there been anything like it. We did a phenomenal job with the pandemic. We handed them over a country where the economy and where the stock market was higher than it was before the pandemic came in. Nobody's ever seen anything like it. We made ventilators for the entire world. We got gowns, we got masks, we did things that nobody thought possible. And people give me credit for rebuilding the military. They give me credit for a lot of things, but not enough credit for the great job we did with the pandemic. But the only jobs they got were bounce back jobs. These were jobs bounce back, and it bounced back and it went to their benefit. But I was the one that created them. They know it, and so does everybody else.
Vice President Harris, I'll let you respond.
So Donald Trump has no plan for you. And when you look at his economic plan, it's all about tax breaks for the richest people. I am offering what I describe as an opportunity economy, and the best economists in our country, if not the world, have reviewed our relative plans for the future of America. What Goldman Sachs has said is that Donald Trump's plan would make the economy worse. Mine would strengthen the economy. What the Wharton School has said is Donald Trump's plan would actually explode the deficit. 16 Nobel laureates have described his economic plan as something that would increase inflation and by the middle of next year would invite a recession. You just have to look at where we are and where we stand on the issues. And I'd invite you to know that Donald Trump actually has no plan for you because he is more interested in defending himself than he is in looking out for you.
That's just a soundbite. They gave her that to say. Look, I went to the Wharton School of Finance, and many of those professors, the top professors, think my plan is a brilliant plan. It's a great plan. It's a plan that's going to bring up our worth, our value as a country. It's going to make people want to be able to go and work and create jobs and create a lot of good, solid money for our country. And just to finish off, she doesn't have a plan. She copied Biden's plan, and it's like 4 sentences, like run, spot, run. 4 sentences that are just, oh, we'll try and lower taxes. She doesn't have a plan. Take a look at her plan. She doesn't have a plan.
Mr. President, I do want to drill down on something you both brought up. The Vice President brought up your tariffs. You responded, and let's drill down on this, because your plan is what she calls is essentially a national sales tax. Your proposal calls for tariffs, as you pointed out here, on foreign imports across the board. You recently said that you might double your plan, imposing tariffs up to 20% on goods coming into this country. As you know, many economists say that with tariffs at that level, costs are then passed on to the consumer. Vice President Harris has argued it'll mean higher prices on gas, food, clothing, medication, arguing it costs the typical family nearly $4,000 a year. Do you believe Americans can afford higher prices because of tariffs?
They're not going to have higher prices. What's going to have and who's going to have higher prices is China and all of the countries that have been ripping us off for years. I was the only president ever. China was paying us hundreds of billions of dollars, and so were other countries. And, you know, if she doesn't like them, they should have gone out and they should have immediately cut the tariffs. But those tariffs are there 3.5 years now under their administration. We are going to take in billions of dollars, hundreds of billions of dollars. I had no inflation, virtually no inflation. They had the highest inflation perhaps in the history of our country, because I've never seen a worse period of time. People can't go out and buy cereal or bacon or eggs or anything else. The people of our country are absolutely dying with what they've done. They've destroyed the economy. And all you have to do is look at a poll. The polls say 80 and 85 and even 90% that the Trump economy was great, that their economy was terrible.
Vice President Harris, I do want to ask for your response, and you heard what the president said there, because the Biden administration did keep a number of the Trump tariffs in place. So how do you respond?
Well, let's be clear that the Trump administration resulted in a trade deficit, one of the highest we've ever seen in the history of America. He invited trade wars. You want to talk about his deal with China? What he ended up doing is, under Donald Trump's presidency, he ended up selling American chips to China to help them improve and modernize their military, basically sold us out, when a policy about China should be in making sure the United States of America wins the competition for the 21st century, which means focusing on the details of what that requires, focusing on relationships with our allies, focusing on investing in American-based technology so that we win the race on AI, on quantum computing, focusing on what we need to do to support America's workforce so that we don't end up having, on the short end of the stick, in terms of workers' rights. But what Donald Trump did, let's talk about this, with COVID, is he actually thanked President Xi for what he did during COVID. Look at his tweet. "Thank you, President Xi," exclamation point, when we know that Xi was responsible for lacking and not giving us transparency about the origins of COVID.
President Trump, I'll let you respond.
First of all, they bought their chips from Taiwan. We hardly make chips anymore because of philosophies like they have and policies like they have. I don't say her because she has no policy. Everything that she believed 3 years ago and 4 years ago is out the window. She's going to my philosophy now. In fact, I was going to send her a MAGA hat. She's gone to my philosophy. But if she ever got elected, she'd change it. And it will be the end of our country. She's a Marxist. Everybody knows she's a Marxist. Her father's a Marxist professor in economics, and he taught her well. But when you look at what she's done to our country, and when you look at these millions and millions of people that are pouring into our country monthly, where it's, I believe, 21 million people, not the 15 that people say, and I think it's a lot higher than the 21. That's bigger than New York State pouring in. And just look at what they're doing to our country. They're criminals. Many of these people coming in are criminals. And that's bad for our economy, too. You know, you mentioned before, we'll talk about immigration later. Well, bad immigration is the worst thing that can happen to our economy. They have, and she has, destroyed our country with policy that's insane. Almost policy that you'd say they have to hate our country.
President Trump, thank you. Lindsay?
I want to turn to the issue of abortion. President Trump, you've often touted that you were able to kill Roe v. Wade. Last year, you said that you were proud to be the most pro-life president in American history. Then last month, you said that your administration would be great for women and their reproductive rights. In your home state of Florida, you surprised many with regard to your 6-week abortion ban, because you initially had said that it was too short. And you said, quote, "I'm going to be voting that we need more than 6 weeks." But then the very next day, you reversed course and said you would vote to support the 6-week ban. Vice President Harris says that women shouldn't trust you on the issue of abortion because you've changed your position so many times. Therefore, why should they trust you?
Well, the reason I'm doing that vote is because the plan is, as you know, the vote is, they have abortion in the 9th month. They even have, and you can look at the governor of West Virginia, the previous governor of West Virginia, not the current governor, who's doing an excellent job, but the governor before, he said the baby will be born and we will decide what to do with the baby. In other words, we'll execute the baby. And that's why I did that, because that predominates, because they're radical. The Democrats are radical in that. And her vice presidential pick, which I think was a horrible pick, by the way, for our country, because he is really out of it. But her vice presidential pick says abortion in the 9th month is absolutely fine. He also says execution after birth. It's execution, no longer abortion, because the baby is born, is okay. And that's not okay with me, hence the vote. But what I did is something for 52 years. They've been trying to get Roe v. Wade into the states. And through the genius and heart and strength of 6 Supreme Court justices, we were able to do that. Now, I believe in the exceptions for rape, incest, and life of the mother. I believe strongly in it. Ronald Reagan did also. 85% of Republicans do. Exceptions. Very important. But we were able to get it, and now states are voting on it. And for the first time, you're going to see, look, this is an issue that's torn our country apart for 52 years. Every legal scholar, every Democrat, every Republican, liberal, conservative, they all wanted this issue to be brought back to the states where the people could vote. And that's what happened. Now, Ohio, the vote was somewhat liberal. Kansas, the vote was somewhat liberal, much more liberal than people would have thought. But each individual state is voting. It's the vote of the people now. It's not tied up in the federal government. I did a great service in doing it. It took courage to do it. And the Supreme Court had great courage in doing it. And I give tremendous credit to those 6 justices.
There is no state in this country where it is legal to kill a baby after it's born. Madam Vice President, I want to get your response to President Trump.
Well, as I said, you're going to hear a bunch of lies, and that's not actually a surprising fact. Let's understand how we got here. Donald Trump hand-selected 3 members of the United States Supreme Court with the intention that they would undo the protections of Roe v. Wade. And they did exactly as he intended. And now in over 20 states, there are Trump abortion bans, which make it criminal for a doctor or nurse to provide health care. In one state, it provides prison for life. Trump abortion bans that make no exception even for rape and incest, which understand what that means. A survivor of a crime of violation to their body does not have the right to make a decision about what happens to their body next. That is immoral. And one does not have to abandon their faith or deeply held beliefs to agree. The government, and Donald Trump certainly, should not be telling a woman what to do with her body. I have talked with women around our country. You want to talk about this is what people wanted? Pregnant women who want to carry a pregnancy to term, suffering from a miscarriage, being denied care in an emergency room because the healthcare providers are afraid they might go to jail, and she's bleeding out in a car in the parking lot. She didn't want that. Her husband didn't want that. A 12 or 13-year-old survivor of incest being forced to carry a pregnancy to term. They don't want that. And I pledge to you, when Congress passes a bill to put back in place the protections of Roe v. Wade, as President of the United States, I will proudly sign it into law. But understand, if Donald Trump were to be reelected, he will sign a national abortion ban. Understand, in his Project 2025, there would be a national abortion, a monitor that would be monitoring your pregnancies, your miscarriages. I think the American people believe that certain freedoms, in particular the freedom to make decisions about one's own body, should not be made by the government.
Thank you, Vice President Harris.
Well, there she goes again. It's a lie. I'm not signing a ban, and there's no reason to sign a ban, because we've gotten what everybody wanted. Democrats, Republicans, and everybody else, and every legal scholar wanted it to be brought back into the states, and the states are voting. And it may take a little time, but for 52 years, this issue has torn our country apart, and they've wanted it back in the states. And I did something that nobody thought was possible. The states are now voting. What she says is an absolute lie. And as far as the abortion ban, no, I'm not in favor of abortion ban, but it doesn't matter, because this issue has now been taken over by the states.
Would you veto a national abortion ban if it came to your desk?
Well, I won't have to, because, again, 2 things. Number one, she said she'll go back to Congress. She'll never get the vote. It's impossible for her to get the vote, especially now with the 50-50, essentially 50-50 in both Senate and the House. She's not going to get the vote. She can't get the vote. She won't even come close to it. So it's just talk. You know what it reminds me of? When they said they're going to get student loans terminated, and it ended up being a total catastrophe. The student loans, and then I think probably her boss, if you call him a boss, he spends all his time on the beach. But look, her boss went out and said, we'll do it again. We'll do it a different way. And he went out, got rejected again by the Supreme Court. So all these students got taunted with this whole thing about this whole idea, and how unfair that would have been. Part of the reason they lost. to the millions and millions of people that had to pay off their student loans. They didn't get it for free. But they were saying it's the same way that they talked about that they talk about abortion.
But if I could just get a yes or no, because your running mate, J.D. Vance, has said that you would veto it if it did come to your desk.
Well, I didn't discuss it with J.D. In all fairness, J.D., and I don't mind if he has a certain view, but I think he was speaking for me, but I really didn't. Look, we don't have to discuss it because she'd never be able to get it, just like she couldn't get student loans. They couldn't get student loans. They didn't even come close to getting student loans. They taunted young people and a lot of other people that had loans. They can never get this approved. So it doesn't matter what she says about going to Congress. Well, wonderful. Let's go to Congress. Do it. But the fact is that for years they wanted to get it out of Congress and out of the federal government, and we did something that everybody said couldn't be done. And now you have a vote of the people on abortion.
Vice President Harris, I want to give you your time to respond, but I do want to ask, would you support any restrictions on a woman's right to an abortion?
I absolutely support reinstating the protections of Roe v. Wade, and as you rightly mentioned, nowhere in America is a woman carrying a pregnancy to term and asking for an abortion. That is not happening. It's insulting to the women of America. And understand what has been happening under Donald Trump's abortion bans. Couples who pray and dream of having a family are being denied IVF treatments. What is happening in our country? Working people, working women who are working 1 or 2 jobs, who can barely afford childcare as it is, have to travel to another state to get on a plane sitting next to strangers to go and get the health care she needs, barely can afford to do it, and what you are putting her through is unconscionable. And the people of America have not, the majority of Americans believe in a woman's right to make decisions about her own body, and that is why in every state where this issue has been on the ballot, in red and blue states both, the people of America have voted for freedom.
Vice President Harris,
excuse me, I have to respond. Another lie. It's another lie. I have been a leader on IVF, which is fertilization. The IVF, I have been a leader. In fact, when they got a very negative decision on IVF from the Alabama courts, I saw the people of Alabama and the legislature 2 days later voted it in. I've been a leader on it. They know that, and everybody else knows it. I have been a leader on fertilization, IVF. And the other thing, you should ask, will she allow abortion in the 8th month, 9th month, 7th month?
Come on.
Okay, would you do that? Why don't you ask her that question?
Why don't you answer
That's
the
problem.
question? Would you
because
veto?
Under Roe v.
Answer
Wade,
the question. Would you veto?
You could do abortions in the 7th month, the 8th month, the 9th
That's
month,
not true.
and probably after birth. Just look at the governor, former governor of Virginia. The governor of Virginia said, we put the baby aside and then we determine what we want to do with the baby.
President Trump, thank you.
We're going to turn now to immigration and border security. We know it's an issue that's important to Republicans, Democrats, voters across the board in this country. Vice President Harris, you were tasked by President Biden with getting to the root causes of migration from
early. A lot more are casting their ballots on this election day. Of course, polling locations are already tabulating some of those ballots. And this is a live look at one of those locations out of Philadelphia as they are currently counting those ballots right there. This is a look at our live countdown to when the first polls close on the East Coast, 3 hours, 51 minutes, and 33 seconds. And so we do expect to start getting some of those results after those polls close as people are tabulating those ballots. And of course, you can count on Live Now from Fox to bring you the very latest information as it comes out. Our primetime coverage begins at 6 p.m. Eastern time today, right here on Live Now from Fox. We are going to be giving you those results in real time as they come in. The presidential race, of course, but also the very important congressional races as the Senate, the balance of power hangs swings in the balance right here, as well as the House. We're also talking about those all-important gubernatorial races and those ballot initiatives. So all of that we are going to be sharing with you in real time. We have a panel of experts to talk about what these results mean for you, for the average American, what this means for your wallet, what this means for your future. So we're going to be speaking with experts throughout the night and also throughout the next day, because this isn't going to end tonight. This is going to spill over into tomorrow. We have you covered 24 hours a day right here on Live Now from Fox. All right, we're going to step away for a quick 2-minute break. We're going to be right back.
A lot of bad things happened. This is that big, powerful, vicious part of them. No, it's a vicious machine. I mean, they can take all these bad ideas and win elections. It's like there's only way you could do that. One way. There's only one way.
Sir, if Donald Trump loses the election today, should he concede?
There's been this, I think, brewed up concern that I think is
Leader of Government Relations and Public Affairs at Hogan Lovells. Aaron, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us. We appreciate it.
Thanks for having me today, Stephanie. It's been good.
Yeah, so I mean, a lot of movement already when we're talking about folks casting their ballots. But I do want to ask you this: early voting versus voting on Election Day. Voting on Election Day, traditional, right? This is what millions of Americans prefer to do. This year, though, we have seen historic levels of early voting. And from your perspective, you know, in politics, does this indicate anything when it comes to the amount of excitement and then also perhaps the results of the polls?
So it's hard to tell at this stage. It does show enthusiasm, right? Republicans this time around in 2020, President Trump told them that it's okay to vote early. Right. In 2016, there was a healthy skepticism, or 2020, there was a healthy skepticism about voting early. He said, go to the polls. I don't trust voting early. This time, President Trump said, please vote early. Mail-in ballots are fine. Get there early. Just vote. So you're seeing a surge in Republicans voting early this time around. What we don't know is whether those Republicans are new voters, whether they were voters that weren't going to vote. Anyhow, so we don't know that yet. We're not going to know that until the exit polling comes out late tonight, tomorrow. So it's hard to discern what sort of voter that is and how it's going to impact the outcome of the election right now.
And as you mentioned, we're not really going to know some of those statistics until those exit polls are conducted. When it comes to energizing not just the base, because I think for both parties, for the Republican Party and also the Democratic Party, the bases are energized. It's the other voters really that are key in this particular race, undecided voters and perhaps voters who just decided they weren't going to vote this time around. You know, have you seen any difference for this election cycle when it comes to maybe people who decided, you know what, we're just not going to participate and then change their mind? Has there been any discussion on that?
Yeah, I've heard anecdotally that people are voting for the first time. You know, they're upset about the economy. They're upset about immigration. They're upset about President Trump's, one of his speaker's remarks at MSG a few weeks ago. So there were incidents in this campaign, this cycle, that got people out of the House to vote for the first time on either side, against either candidate, for either candidate, for whatever reason. We just don't know yet if that's going to impact the race. Last time around in 2020, Pennsylvania was decided, Wisconsin was decided by tens of thousands of votes. So it could be enough this time around to really be determinative in one of these swing states.
And you were saying this time around, it could really be the determining factor. What other factors are you taking a look at? I mean, we've heard time and time again, you know, this is going to be the most important election. We've heard that before, but this time it does seem different. Are there any unique factors that you're keeping a very close eye on this time around?
There are a lot of factors, right? The Dobbs decision, women, the gender gap between men and women, never Trumpers, Republicans, Liz Cheney campaigning, Biden supporters, whether they're all going to transfer to Harris. There wasn't a primary after Biden stepped down. There was a coronation. President Trump was shot in the ear. We've never seen that before, and gets up and, you know, kind of rallies and said, fight, fight, fight after that. That was an iconic image. I think that rallied his base and a lot of new supporters for him after that happened. The economy, inflation, right? I bought eggs today, $4.39. When President Trump was in office, they were $1.50. So I think the American people are still feeling that, and they're going to go vote and based on their pocketbooks. Bill Clinton famously said, "It's the economy, stupid." Are you better off now than you were 4 years ago? So I think people are going to be thinking about that too. We still have Ukraine, Russia, Gaza, Israel going on. So that's in the back of people's mind. That's going to impact Michigan in a significant way, I think. Jill Stein, RFK Jr.
Fake news websites. They have lists that go on and on of dozens of domains that are created by Russia to try to appear as if they're real news organizations, sometimes even being very local to try to target voters to make them think that they're seeing something that isn't actually true, like those videos.
And Tom, as you scan the country right now, what other potential threats are law enforcement officials monitoring?
Well, it's a whole host of things, and really there's been a lot of political violence this year. I mean, as we all well know, the 2 attempts on Donald Trump, but there's been a lot of political violence that we've seen around the globe. We've seen it in both hemispheres. We've seen it in Europe. We've seen it in Africa. So I think the big question here is, as we move forward, is what can we expect in the next 24 hours? And I think there's 2 things that are going on right now. One, and an awful lot of threats that continue to come in and arrests that have been made in the last 24 hours of people threatening polling workers or polling locations or state election officials. That's been very high, and my colleague Julia knows that all too well, crisscrossing the country, focusing on those threats and what polling centers have had to do to protect themselves from the anticipated threats and possible violence that they could get. And that leads us to the second component, which is this idea that as we go forward, if there's some sort of a question or it takes time for the results to come in and takes time for news organizations or states to call those results of the election, that the disinformation that Julia talked about, whether it be from foreign actors such as Russia or people here in the United States, that could really ramp up and perhaps push people to violence. That's something we're going to be watching going forward.
Yeah, and Julia, briefly, this can all feel so existential. So what can an individual, a person do if they see something online that they're not sure about or at a polling station?
I asked that question to the CISA director just last week, and she said that voters should look to their state and local officials. Just as we saw Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger do a press conference today about those bomb threats that allegedly come from Russia, he was able to get out in front of it far before we will see the FBI make a conclusion, far before we'll see CISA do anything publicly, because they want to leave this to state and locals. That is what they believe will give the most trust to voters, that there's no kind of federal overreach here in terms of deciding what's true and what's not true about elections.
Okay, Julia Ainsley and Tom Winter, thanks for your reporting. We appreciate it.
Still ahead, why hasn't America put a woman in the White House, and could that change tonight? Our Ali Vitale literally wrote a book on the topic. She'll be with us just ahead on NBC.
NBC News Daily is #1 for afternoon news across all of television.
I'm Morgan Radford.
I'm Vicki Wynn.
I'm Kate Snow.
And I'm Zinklea Samwat.
What's happening around the world?
Israel's military is building up there along the border.
And what matters here at home?
New numbers are out today showing more encouraging signs for our economy.
Let's zero in on exercise. We know we're supposed to be doing it. What does it do for our health?
What needs to change for social media to be a safer place?
NBC News Daily, weekdays from 12 to 4 on NBC News Now.
Election day is finally here, and it's been a long, long race for the White House with a lot of twists and turns.
Fortunately, we have some political insiders here to talk about how both the Trump and Harris campaigns have closed out their final days. Here with us, NBC News political analyst Maria Teresa Kumar, the president and CEO of Voto Latino, an organization that endorsed Vice President Kamala Harris, and Mark Short, a Meet the Press political analyst and former chief of staff to Vice President Mike Pence. Good to see you both. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having us.
So, Mark, I do want to start with you. Some of our reporters covering the Trump campaign have noted some waning enthusiasm in his more recent rallies in these final days of the campaign. What are you hearing from Republicans?
I think that there's still a lot of enthusiasm for Trump among his core supporters. I think that it's been a long campaign. There's been a lot of rallies, so I wouldn't read too much into that, honestly. But again, I think that the challenge with the Trump campaign is that there's enormous strong support for him that makes sure he has a very high floor, but he also has a low ceiling. And the question is, what can you do beyond that base to help you win?
And Maria, it's interesting because on the flip side, on the other campaign, the Harris campaign, you've got all this excitement, right? Last night it was Oprah, and so there seems to be a lot of excitement, but is it possible that that's sort of overshadowing the real policy issues that people need to pay attention to if they're going to vote for her.
You know, it's really interesting, and I think this is where it was a little bit hard for Trump. Trump has been campaigning for 9 years. She has been campaigning for 104 days, more or less. And so her job was to basically make sure that she could mobilize independent, moderate voters, really gave this amplification to her platform. But then she also needed to mobilize the 12 million more young new voters that were not even in the political game because they weren't eligible to vote in 2020. So when she started talking to Lady Gaga, she started using Bad Bunny, it was basically to break the balkanized information cycles that these young people don't consume. And so when people were like, well, what does Bad Bunny have to do with any of it? He all of a sudden is sharing his message on TikTok to low information, low propensity voters, saying, hey, look over here. There's someone here on your side.
People who are less likely to vote.
Who are less likely to vote. And so in that sense, she's effectively learned how to use celebrity in a way that I haven't seen in a long time. Because I will tell you, when I was knocking on doors in Pennsylvania and Nevada and Arizona, heard the same things. Like, my son wasn't sure if he was going to vote. But now all of a sudden, he heard about it on TikTok, and he actually likes this idea that he's going to have to pay $35 for insulin. I didn't know that he was eligible. Stuff like that. So it was these new avenues of communication.
President Trump has also mobilized celebrity support. I think of Joe Rogan with the Top podcast. But it's not just about the presidential, right? We're also looking down ballot. The GOP has the chance to retake the Senate. Is that more important than the White House?
I wouldn't say it's more important, but I think it's equally important. I think the reality is that Republicans will retake the Senate. I think that's pretty much assured at this point. The question is, what is that margin? And if she's president, then that's going to be a big change for her as far as getting legislation through and also getting cabinet posts confirmed. But conversely, I think there's been less conversation about the notion people assume that whichever candidate wins the presidency will carry the House. And I'm not as confident on that because the Trump coalition he's carved into the traditional Democrat support in some minority districts, African-American, Latino areas, but not enough to carry a House district. Where he's bleeding support is in the suburbs where there are a lot of swing districts. So he may carve into some support in Philly or Detroit to win those states, but you're losing those swing districts in the House. And so I think that either way, we're going to end up with divided government here.
Which makes it really hard to govern, right? Maria, the gender gap gets talked about a lot. Former President Trump has had in polling a lot of strength among men, particularly young men, even some men of color. Do you think that Harris has done enough to combat that, or to try to pull those men to her, or is she going to lose men?
No, I don't think she's going to lose men. I think that but what I do think is interesting, and that's what we were talking about in the green room, just to put the curtain aside, was this idea that Trump made an unforced error. And so people that were with him, women that were with him, all of a sudden are not.
When he said, I don't care either way.
I don't care either way and stuff. So I do think that it's going to be an incredible analysis post-election, because what we have seen is, again, someone who's been campaigning for 9 years and one who's been campaigning for 100 days.
And time will tell where it all lands.
Exactly.
Teresa Kumar, Mark Short, thank you both. We got a lot more ahead.
Still ahead, a long...
News lives in the now.
Look at this. You can't even see anything anymore.
Let's break down what we know.
You gotta see this.
News for the generation of now is NBC News Now.
Good morning begins with hope and optimism, a chance to start fresh. We want to welcome you in to share a moment that brightens your day, because every day deserves the best start.
More Americans turn to NBC News than any other news organization.
It's the bottom of the hour now. We have much more Decision 2024 coverage coming up. But first, we want to check in on some of the other stories making headlines on NBC News Daily.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has fired his defense minister Yoav Gallant. In a statement today, Netanyahu claimed that full trust is needed between the Prime Minister and the Minister of Defense. There's been a growing rift between Netanyahu and Gallant as the war in the Middle East has pressed on. Gallant posted on social media saying in part that the security of the state of Israel was and will always remain the mission of his life. A new defense minister is already set to take his place.
After a strike that lasted more than 7 weeks, union machinists at Boeing have now come to a new deal with Boeing. The new contract will give workers a 39% wage increase over the course of 4 years. The Boeing machinists voted 59% in favor of the deal. It was the union's third vote since aircraft production had halted back in September. Boeing employees must return to work by November 12th.
And former NFL star Jason Kelce is apologizing for smashing a fan's cell phone. The incident was caught on video Saturday at Penn State University shortly before Kelce appeared on ESPN. Video posted on social media showed a fan using a homophobic slur to insult Jason's brother, Travis, and his relationship with pop star Taylor Swift. Jason Kelce responded by grabbing the fan's phone and smashing it onto the ground. Kelce later apologized last night on ESPN, saying that he is not proud of what he did.
All right, let's get right back to Election Day. Polls are open in all 50 states now and Washington, D.C.
Both the former President Trump and Harris campaigns have spent a lot of time in North Carolina with its 16 electoral votes up for grabs. And that's where we find NBC News correspondent Antonia Hilton outside of a polling place in Raleigh, North Carolina. Antonia, a Democratic presidential candidate has not won North Carolina since 2008. Both campaigns have spent a lot of time and resources there. So what are you hearing from voters as they go to cast their ballots?
Well, Zincle, there's an immense amount of excitement here and some nerves from voters on all sides. But I'll tell you, one of the issues that just keeps coming up time and again, you won't be surprised, it's abortion and women's reproductive rights. And this is a state where there is a new restriction in place that the lawmakers here put in place not long ago. It is something that is motivating a lot of people. And in a state where there are a lot of unaffiliated, middle of the road, moderate voters, people who care about issues like abortion, but may not necessarily be, have an affinity for either one of the two major parties, that is going to be a major factor if the Democrats end up making history tonight. It's going to be because they brought those people into their coalition. They were able to turn out historic levels of black voters and young voters here. Take a listen to some of the conversations we've had with a Kamala Harris supporter and former President Trump supporter. Did you think about your kids as you made your decision?
Yeah, I did. I have a daughter, and I think she should be making decisions for herself and her life, just like everybody else.
Still don't know what to look forward to. And even with all the presidents before, I mean, nobody actually fulfilled whatever they promised completely, So it's just like a win-lose situation.
A lot of talk, no action.
Pretty much.
The last voter you met there made a late break for former President Trump. But I'll say, it's very much a mix here because we've met others who've done the same and gone for Harris, Zincle.
All right, Antonia Hilton, thank you so much.
We want to take you to Washington, D.C. right now because we have some video coming in of Vice President Kamala Harris visiting a phone bank there where people are making phone calls on her behalf. Now, it's interesting because we haven't seen her all day, actually, not since last night after midnight in that big rally in Philadelphia. Now we're seeing her. It looks like she's making a phone call herself. Let's listen in.
Thank you so very much. It's so important that everybody participates, and I thank you because I'm sure you got a lot of other things you could be doing, but taking the time to vote really does make a difference. So thank you for that. And you enjoy your day, okay?
The vice president right now appearing to make a stop at the DNC phone bank. And of course, we're expecting to see her later today at Howard University, her alma mater.
Right, that's where her watch party will be later tonight as the results come in.
So stay with us. Now we're going to turn overseas. The intense focus on the election is not just happening in America, it's global.
Around the world, people are watching and waiting to see who the next leader of the United States will be. Americans are voting amid multiple international crises, of course. The consequences of today's vote could reach far beyond our borders, from the Middle East to Russia to Ukraine and beyond. NBC News chief international correspondent Keir Simmons joins us now from Dubai. Keir, there are two wars raging, right? We've got so many other international crises going on. Our next president will have to deal with all of that. What do you hear from people outside the U.S. and how they're looking at this election?
Well, I tell you, this election matters to the world. Maybe unlike an American election for a generation. It's not just a difference in styles between President Trump, former President Trump and Vice President Harris. She, of course, a West Coast lawyer. In 2019, Kim Jong-un of North Korea standing alongside former President Trump. Now he's pictured standing alongside nuclear centrifuges. It's about the competition with China, the continuing crisis around Taiwan, the clashes between that American partner, the Philippines, and China in the ocean there. And I could just go on and on. There are so many issues, and all of them are going to be in the next president's inbox. So the world is watching. Frankly, the world is biting its collective fingernails. Different parts of the world want different sides to win, if you like. Even American analysis have different views, but everybody knows this is important.
And Keir, can we dig into that American adversaries point you brought up? I think of Russia, China, Iran. What are they saying about this election? What have you learned?
Well, we do have analysis. A company called Filter Labs, a U.S. company that sifts through social media and state television output and uses AI and analysts. The Russian side really leans towards President Trump. The Iranian side more towards Harris, and China really kind of in the middle, but still wanting knowing that this is important. And of course, in China's case, there's an interest, honestly, in Beijing to see America diminish. So you're right. It is right. And we have been in those countries, and we've spoken to people on the street. It's reflected in the opinions of people on the street. It is right that they have different views. But again, everybody is clear that America is engaged in today is going to have an impact.
Reporting on the global response to Election Day in Dubai. Thank you.
Well, even before we know the results, this election cycle has...
Capitol Hill correspondent Ali Vitale is here with us in studio.
And Ali, you've done a lot of research on this topic because you wrote a book on the topic. It's called Electable: Why America Hasn't Put a Woman in the White House Yet.
Yeah.
The yet is important. Here we are on Election Day, and I don't want to be partisan about this. Nobody knows who's going to win tonight. But does it feel that there's a possibility there, and why?
It definitely feels like there's a possibility there because it's a 50-50 race. And so it is at this point a toss-up of who wins the presidency. And that means that Kamala Harris is once again potentially within striking distance. I say once again because we saw this same situation in 2016. Hillary Clinton making history as the first woman to win a major party nomination. Here's the difference for Kamala Harris. She is not the first to... It's all about bridging the so-called imagination gap, letting people imagine what they've never seen before. She, being the vice president, too, has done more work in putting the bricks in that road.
Ali, beyond the record of other women who have run for office before, you're not new to this. You covered Harris when she first had her bid for the White House. I wonder, is she operating differently at all? What have you witnessed?
She herself, I think, is a much more confident candidate. You saw it in her early year in the vice presidency. She had a tough road, a lot of criticism for her. Some of it was fair, some of it absolutely wasn't. And we sort of parsed that out in real time. But as I wrote in my book, one of the things that people thought about then was when you're damned if you do and damned if you don't so often in your career, sometimes it's hard to trust your gut. What has happened in this White House over the course of her vice presidency is she's learned to trust her gut, but the issue issue set has also met her where she is. There is such an authenticity to being a woman talking about that really allows it to be a top issue for her while it's also one of the energizing issues around the country.
Let me ask this, whether she wins or not tonight, could it help a future woman? You know, could what she's done so far, just to this point, be sort of a roadmap for a woman of any party?
Absolutely, because for every woman who runs for the presidency, but really for any office, they are all knowingly putting bricks in the road for whoever comes behind them. There is such a high stake and a balancing act to that, and we often talk about the high wire act that female candidates have to walk.
The double standards.
The double standards, but I will tell you, the media is more primed, to call this stuff out right now in a way that I didn't necessarily, and that I definitely don't remember seeing in 2016. And so that's a sign of progress in and of itself, the way that we are just allowing women to run and potentially win by their own merits. And the way she's running leans into that. She's not talking about breaking glass ceilings. She's not talking about being the first. She's just saying, hey, this is my issue set. This is why I think you should vote for me, and I want to win.
All right, Ali Vitale, great to have you. Thank you.
Thanks, guys. Thanks. Still ahead, the road to the White House has been a long and winding one.
I'll take you through all the bumps and the turns, things you might have even, well, not that, but other things you might have forgotten about. It's all next on NBC Newsday. What's the message that you're trying to get out to young people?
Know what is in the drug supply.
We've got important news this hour about your money.
Mental health, big picture, why is it so tough right now?
News for the generation of now is NBC News Now.
Mornings are full of possibility and energy, and how you get set for the day ahead matters. It's about getting caught up and getting ahead, because every day deserves the best start.
Believe it or not, we've officially reached the finish line in campaign season, and sometimes I think it felt like a blur, right?
Yeah, and one thing is for sure, even before we know the results, this election is already shaping America's future.
We believe in the promise of America!
Our country will be bigger, better, bolder.
It's an election fight that looks much 2 years ago to the day.
America's comeback starts right now.
Former President Donald Trump locked in the Republican nomination with ease, defeating a parade of challengers and battling a slew of legal cases.
That is 34 felony counts here, all guilty verdicts.
This is unprecedented for a former American president to be criminally convicted.
This was a rigged, disgraceful trial.
Supporters under Trump could best tackle the economy and immigration.
I'm the only one in history who got indicted and my numbers went up.
Initially set for a rematch against President Joe Biden.
I'm still the only person to ever beat Donald Trump.
They made history as the oldest major party presidential candidates ever in an American election. A concern for voters and whispers about Biden's mental fitness soon grew louder.
The special counsel referred to the president as a, quote, sympathetic elderly man with a poor memory.
My memory is fine.
But that first presidential debate in June set off 3 weeks of unprecedented political upheaval.
Look, if we finally beat Medicare.
This night got off to a tough start for President Biden.
I think it's a legitimate question to say, is this an episode or is this a condition?
Calls for Biden to suspend his re-election campaign were sidelined by an unthinkable twist.
This is an NBC News special report.
Take a look at what happened.
The 45th president of the United States, injured but alive.
All of this unfolding with Republicans now gathering to officially nominate Donald Trump at their convention.
With his ear bandaged, the former president making an emotional entrance just 2 days after the attempt on his life.
When Donald Trump rose to his feet in that Pennsylvania field, all of America stood with him.
I stand before you in this arena only by the grace of Almighty God.
That same week, President Biden testing positive for COVID.
News broke of different Democratic leaders calling for the president to step aside.
My fellow Americans.
Days later, the president ending his re-election bid.
I revere this office, but I love my country more.
Endorsing Vice President Kamala Harris and upending the race with just over 100 days until the election.
We choose freedom.
Energized by their first female nominee of Black and Indian descent, issues of abortion rights and protecting democracy.
Ours is a fight for the future.
Trump pivoting to his new opponent.
I didn't know she was black until a number of years ago when she happened to turn black.
I accept your nomination to be president of the United States of America.
Debate.
I've never seen a worse period of time. People can't go out and buy cereal or bacon or eggs or anything else.
The government and Donald Trump certainly should not be telling a woman what to do with her body.
And this famous falsehood.
They're eating the dogs, the people that came in. They're eating the cats.
The vice presidential debate striking a different tone.
I agree with a lot of what Senator Vance said about what's happening. And I think that Governor Walz and I actually probably agreed.
But the dangers of our nation's divisiveness still on display.
The FBI says there has been another possible attempt on former President Trump's life.
By fall, the critical battleground blitz amid one of the closest presidential races ever.
I'm a gun owner. Tim Walz is a gun.
I did not know that.
If somebody breaks in my house, they're getting shot.
I think the bigger problem is the enemy from within.
The razor-thin margin bringing out bold-faced names.
Vice President Kamala Harris.
President Trump must win.
Podcast interviews taking center stage. Dance party going viral. And his Madison Square Garden rally sparking controversy.
There's literally a floating island of garbage in the middle of the